Chapter 999. As his father and elder brother were serving in the Great Xia army, Pei Xinjian, a famous general from the Great Tang Empire, didn't hesitate to seek shelter in Shanghai City the very same day he appeared in the wilderness. He was looking forward to reuniting with his father and elder brother. Pei Xinjian was born in the Pei family of Hedong. He was taught the art of military tactics by General Su Dingfang and served as the left garrison guard Song Chao adjunct officer, Shi prefecture commandery head, and Anshi governor. When he was in the western region, many countries submitted to him out of admiration. After that, he became the chief of the Second Left Army in Taozhou and the chief of the Right Army in Qinzhou, participating in the defense against Tubo. In the first year of Tiaolu, he captured the rebellious Khagan of the Western Turks, Ashina Kianduzi, and was promoted to Minister of Rights and Grand General of the Right Guard, holding both civil and military posts. In the following year, he defeated the forces of Ashina Funian and Ashina de Wenfu of the Eastern Turks and raised the remnants of the Turks. From Pei Xinjian's resume, it was not difficult to see that not only did this valiant general not fall short of his father's style, he even had a vague posture of the student has surpassed the master, especially in the battle against the Tubo and Turkic Khaganate. With Pei Xinjian's talent, it would not be a problem for him to take charge of an army. Unfortunately, the Great Xia army didn't have a vacant legion commander position. Ouyang Shuo could only temporarily place Pei Xinjian under the command of the military guard general, Eli, as the deputy legion commander of the 4th Legion of the Imperial Guards. This would allow him to familiarize himself with the Great Siam military system in advance, and he would be promoted in the future. Name: Pei Xinjian, King level, Dynasty, Tang, Identity, Deputy Commander of the 4th Imperial Guard Corps Profession, Advanced General Loyalty, 78 points Commander, 78 Martial Power, 70 Intelligence, 55 Politics, 65 Specialty, Sage General, increases attack power by 25, increases marching speed by 20, works, mixed cursive characters and selected scores, etc. Evaluation. Thrifty, forgiving, generous teacher, understanding of people's good deeds, and magnanimous. Before Pei Xinjian went to take up his post, Ouyang Shuo said with a smile, "I'll allow you to take up your post after the new year. Since the Spring Festival is approaching, you can go to the Flying Bear Army's encampment to visit your father and brother so that you can reunite with your father." It was the 18th of the first month of the 5th year of Gaia. In another month, it would be New Year's Eve. "Thank you for your grace, your majesty." Pei Xinjian was very excited, and he looked very excited. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand and said, "If you really want to thank this prince, then contact your master, General Su Dingfang." As a famous general of the Tang Empire, Su Dingfang first served under Li Jing, and then he began to take charge. He was deeply appreciated and trusted by Emperor Gaozong of Tang for his extraordinary achievements and integrity, and was entrusted with important tasks many times. During this period, Su Dingfang conquered the Western Turks, flattened the Song Mountains, exterminated Beech, and attacked Goguryeo, destroying 3 countries and capturing their rulers. For the first time in history, he expanded the Tang dynasty westward to the Aral Sea of Central Asia, reaching Persia and eastward to the southern Korean peninsula. How could Ouyang Shuo not have any thoughts about such a famous general? Even though Great Xia had many famous generals and valiant generals, no one would complain about having more of them. Furthermore, the Great Xia army was constantly expanding, so they could accommodate more generals. Pei Xinjian had once held both civil and military positions, so naturally, he understood immediately. He cupped his fists and said, "Please rest assured, Your Majesty. I will not disappoint you. I believe that my teacher is also very willing to serve in Great Xia." Strictly speaking, Su Dingfang was a general during the reign of Emperor Gaozong of Tang. At present, the Chang'an court was definitely controlled by the 24 meritorious officials of Emperor Taizong's Lingyan Pavilion. Even if Su Dingfang joined the Tang Empire, he might not be placed in an important position. The key was that the Tang Empire currently only had 1 county, so there was no place for generals to display their talents. Ouyang Shuo believed that with Pei Xingjian's relationship and sincerity, he would be able to recruit a general like Su Dingfang sooner or later, adding another famous general to the Great Xia army. Coincidentally, on the second day after Pei Xingjian's arrival, another valiant general of Great Tang joined. This time, he was not alone, but a whole family. It was the Shui clan of Hedong, with Shui Rengui as the core. Shui Rengui was born in the southern ancestral branch of the Shui clan of Hedong. He joined the army during the last years of Jingguan and fought for decades. He defeated Tiela of the Nine Clans, subdued Goguryeo, and defeated the Turkic Khaganate. He had outstanding achievements and left behind stories such as good strategy to stop war, 3 arrows to calm Tian Shan, divine courage to conquer Liang, benevolent governance of Korea, love the people of Xiangzhou City, and defeat the enemy by removing one's hat. He was the chief historian of Guazhou, the general of the Right Army, the governor of Acting Prefecture, and the Duke of Pingyang. The Shui clan of Hedong could be traced back to the northern and southern dynasties. They were the descendants of the famous general Shui Andu. Shui Rengui's great-grandfather, Shui Rong, was the governor of Xinya and Wuguan counties in the Northern Wei dynasty. He was also the duke of Chengcheng County. His grandfather, Shui Yin, was the governor of the Northern Zhou dynasty. His father, Shui Jiao, was the governor of Xiangqing County in the Sui dynasty. The most special was Shui Rengui's eldest son, Shui Na, who was the general of the left. Shui Na was the model of Shui Dingshan in the historical novel, the husband of Fan Lihua, a female general of the generation. It was because of this relationship that the Shui clan of Hedong chose to attach themselves to the Great Xia. Ouyang Shuo was naturally happy to see this happen. There were many aristocratic families in the Great Xia, such as the Pei clan led by Pei Ju, the Xiahou clan led by Xiahou Ying, the Hui clan led by Hui Tsubing, and the 5 horses of Western Liang. However, because the Great Xia dynasty had a complete talent selection and official assessment system, the aristocratic families could not influence the politics of the court and the people the court used. They could only bring a large number of talents to the court. Just like Pei Xingjian, Ouyang Shuo temporarily arranged for Shui Rengui to take up a position in the 3rd Imperial Guard. At the same time, he also made arrangements for Shui Andu, Shui Rong, Shui Yin, and Shui Jiao. As for Shui Na, it depended on whether Fan Lihua accepted it. Name, Shui Emperor level. Title, one of the 10 great generals in China's history dynasty, Tang Dynasty identity. Deputy Commander of the 3rd Imperial Guard occupation, high-level general loyalty, 75 Commander, 70 martial strength, 90 intelligence, 50 politics, 50 specialty, brave champion of the 3 armies. Increases troop morale by 40, attacks by 35, marching speed by 25. Evaluation, Rengui is valiant and brave. He is a hero of his time. He is loyal and ambitious. Apart from Pei Xingjian and Shui Rengui, the 2 Tang generals, Great Xia also welcomed a few scholars. Speaking of this, it was necessary to talk about the circle of poets in the Tang dynasty. Someone once drew a relationship map of some poets in the Tang dynasty. After reading it, there was only one sentence. The noble circle is really messy. Let's use Du Fu as a node to briefly explain. Du Fu's grandfather, Du Shenyin, was good friends with Song Jiwen. Song Jiwen was also good friends with Yang Jiong, one of the 4 heroes of the early Tang dynasty. Yang Jiong admired Lu Zhaolin, who was also one of the 4 heroes, but was extremely disdainful of the brat Wang Bo. How obsessed was Du Fu's unrequited love for Li Bai? It was similar to the current die-hard fans in rice balls. However, Li Bai liked Meng Haoran, who was also good friends with Du Fu. It was really messy. Wang Wei was Meng Haoran's bosom friend. Li Bai, who favored Meng Haoran, had never interacted with Wang Wei. One had to know that the 2 of them existed almost at the same time. It was really strange. Gao Shi was Du Fu's friend, but he dumped Li Bai, who was obsessed with Du Fu. He was also good friends with Li Bai's friend, Wang Chongling. Wasn't it full of gay love? Don't worry, there was a more melodramatic plot. In the next generation, Han Yu worshipped Li Bai, while Lu Yuxi worshipped Du Fu. It just so happened that Han Yu and Lu Yuxi's friend, Lu Zongyuan, were political enemies. Li Du and Li Du were enemies. Their fans could actually fight each other. Du Mu was the most awesome. He directly chose to ignore Li Shangyin, who admired him. Bai Juyi once said that he wanted to be reincarnated as Li Shangyin's son. As a result, the cold and aloof Du Mu directly hated Bai Juyi. As Bai Juyi's good friend, Yuan Zhen was not convinced. He chose to harm Li He, who was praised by Du Mu, to vent his anger for his good friend. Hearing this, would you faint? This was only a small part of it. The Tang dynasty's poetry was brilliant. The Tang dynasty's poets were also like the stars in the Milky Way, brilliant and incomparably brilliant. The two brightest stars were naturally the sage of poetry, Du Fu, and the immortal of poetry, Li Bai. After Du Fu became the county magistrate of Yongye County, in the past few days, poets such as Du Xinyan, Meng Haoren, Gao Shi, Lu Yuxi, and Lu Zongyan arrived in Shanghai City. In this regard, Ouyang Shua did not neglect any of them. According to their preferences and temperament, they would either be given gold and silver to live in, allowing them to freely explore the rivers and mountains of Great Xia. Or, like Du Fu, they would become officials without any delay. Or, they would be allowed to live in a hut in the Lianzhou Basin and live a carefree life as a hermit. Or, they would be sent to teach at the Southwest University China Hall and become a learned scholar. In short, they were not forced and were not restrained. After spending a large amount of money, Ouyang Shua wanted to fight for the reputation of nurturing scholars. At the same time, he wanted to increase the dynasty's cultural index and attract more scholars to settle down in Great Xia. One had to know that these poets were not idle people. Most of them came from the imperial examinations and had the experience of being an official. Perhaps their temperaments were not compatible, or they were talented but not recognized, so they used poetry to express their resentment and dissatisfaction. In Great Xia, these poets could all display their strengths and express their aspirations. The saying, "the sea can accommodate all rivers," was not just a saying. Such broad-mindedness was not inferior to the Tang dynasty in its golden age. Once the news came out, it attracted more scholars to submit to him. Yang Jiong, Lu Zhaolin, and Luo Binwang of the four heroes of the early Tang dynasty, Han Yu and Bai Juyi of the 8 great families of the Tang and Song dynasties, and the poets Li Shangyin and Li He. It could be said to be crowded. In a short period of time, Shanghai City, which was located in the barbarian land of the South, suddenly became brilliant and scholarly. It became the new center of culture and no longer had the reputation of being a barbarian city. For example, Han Yu and a few others who became officials in the imperial court, they simply used Shanghai City as a base and formed a poetry club. On their days off, they would either travel together or drink and sing. It was very lively and carefree. With the festive atmosphere of the approaching Spring Festival, this wave of poetry was pushed to a peak. In which era could scholars have such a free and unfettered time? Their thoughts were further liberated, and their talents were released like turbulent seawater. It could be said to be hardy. In just a few days, more than 10 popular new poems were published. It was really a spectacle. It was under such an atmosphere that the immortal of poetry, Li Bai, arrived. Chapter 1000. The Tang dynasty had 3 unique skills: Li Bai's poems, Pei Min's swordsmanship, and Zhang Su's cursive script. The immortal of poetry, Li Bai, was not only brilliant in his literary talent, but his swordsmanship was also brilliant. He had been fond of swordsmanship since he was 15 years old. After that, his swordsmanship improved on its own. His attainments were so high that he was second only to the sword sage, Pei Min, and ranked second in the Tang dynasty. Perhaps even Gaia favored this reclusive immortal. So he strengthened Li Bai's swordsmanship a second time and infused it with a genuine sword art manual, turning him into a true swordsmanship expert. In Li Bai's opinion, an official career was as fleeting as the clouds in the sky. He hadn't come to Shanghai City to seek fame and fortune, and he'd only come to visit a friend. Even so, it was enough to shake the world. Ouyang Shua wanted to keep this immortal poet, but he had to find a good place for Li Bai. Mr. Swordsmanship is outstanding, so you don't want to be restrained by others. There is a mountain in the east of the city called Dongli Mountain. There was a school on the mountain named Eastern Fence Sword School. Ever since the queen became pregnant, she stepped down from her position as the sword faction's sect leader, leaving it vacant until now. Is Mr. willing to accept this position? Not only will you be free and unfettered, you will also be able to make friends here? Ouyang Shua said. When Li Bai heard this, he immediately became interested. Was the name Dongli taken from Mr. Jingjie's poem, Drinking Wine? Li Bai asked. Mr. Jingjie was Tao Yuan Ming, a poet of the Eastern Jin dynasty. He was known as the ancestor of reclusive poets, or simply the ancestor of poetry. He was a true master of poetry and was the ancestor of Li Bai and Du Fu. Not bad. Okay, Li Bai made up his mind. I'll take this position. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, in that case, congratulations to Mr. The rise of the Eastern Fence Sword faction is hopeful. With the current situation in Jianghu, the Eastern Fence Sword sect needed to rise strongly, so they had to find a grandmaster who could lead the group. Banished Immortal Li Bai was undoubtedly a suitable candidate. Name, Li Bai Saint Tier. Title, Immortal Poet Dynasty. Tang Identity. Headmaster of the Eastern Fence Sword sect. Profession, God-level swordsman. Loyalty, 75 root bone, 20 comprehension, 20 fortune, 10 charm, 18 talent. Wine Sword Immortal, increase sword talent by 80. Martial arts, Green Lotus sword technique. God level. Weapon, Qingping sword. Divine weapon, evaluation. In the past, there was a madman who called you an exiled immortal. His brush shocked the wind and rain, and his poems wept the gods and ghosts. Gaia was truly biased towards Li Bai. Not only did he have a god-tier cultivation technique, he also had a divine weapon. His entire body was custom-made, and coupled with Li Bai's unparalleled talent, he had created an extraordinary sword god. It could be imagined that under the control of Li Bai and the support of Xia Kingdom, the Eastern Fence Sword sect would certainly shine in Jianghu. It was not impossible for them to surpass Wudong and Shaolin. Just when Li Bai took over the position of the head of the Eastern Fence Sword faction, the system announcement sounded. System announcement. The god of swords, Li Bai, has settled down in Great Xia and is in charge of the Eastern Fence Sword faction. He has dazzled the 9 regions. The original title of the land of prosperous martial arts has been automatically promoted to the Holy Land of Martial Arts. Congratulations to the player. Once the news came out, the world was in an uproar. The players were not only surprised that Li Bai was the sword god, but also surprised that such an unrestrained person like Li Bai was willing to take charge of the Eastern Fence Sword School. It was really unexpected. The martial world is going to be chaotic, someone muttered to himself. People with discerning eyes had already seen that a more chaotic martial world was approaching. With the appearance of the major sects in the wilderness, the Eastern Fence Sword faction, which was established by Xia Kingdom itself, was not taken seriously by the adventurers. Who would have thought that there would be such a change? The Eastern Fence Sword faction had the halo of the official sect of Great Xia, and it had the God of Swords. In addition, it had the Nining Sutra, the Tsangshang swordsmanship, and the Yu swordsmanship. It could be said that it had the right time, the right place, and the right people. It had become a popular choice in the eyes of the adventurers. Especially for the players who settled down in Great Xia, the Eastern Fence Sword faction had become the best choice. This time, the martial world was really going to be reshuffled. Ouyang Shua had an ulterior motive in urging Li Bai to take charge of the Eastern Fence Sword faction. He wanted to support the Eastern Fence Sword faction to become the #1 sect in the world, so as to subdue Jianghu and become the supreme in Great Xia. Since ancient times, heroes had violated the rules with their martial arts. If no one intervened, there would be a big mess. This time, under the banner of Li Bai, Ouyang Shua could govern the martial world, and at the same time, he would not be criticized by others. This strategy of Ouyang Shua was really beautiful, and it was something that the adventurers who only knew to watch the fun didn't understand. Ouyang Shua suppressed his thoughts and looked at the attributes of the new title. Martial Arts, Sacred Land. increased the physical fitness of the residents of the dynasty by 50, increased the martial arts proficiency of the warriors of the dynasty by 30, and increased the martial arts comprehension efficiency of the warriors of the dynasty by 40. It was really amazing. Originally, if he wanted to upgrade the land of prosperous martial arts to the martial arts sacred land, he would need to obtain at least 2 more titles of single martial arts, such as Home of Swordsmanship, Home of Spear Arts, and so on. However, the arrival of the God of Swords, Li Bai, saved him a lot of trouble. In this way, after the 100 Schools Sacred Land, Craftsman's Sacred Land, and Poetry's Sacred Land, Great Xia had a 4th title. It was really a gathering of the best in the world, and it deserved its reputation as the strongest dynasty. Gaia 5th year, January 22nd, Summer Palace. The trend of the Tang dynasty's poets seeking refuge in Great Xia gradually subsided, and Shanghai City gradually entered the Spring Festival. Whether it was the ordinary people or the nobles, they all began to buy goods to welcome the arrival of the new year. The entire wilderness had also truly stopped fighting, and it was a scene of peace and tranquility. The Spring Festival held a special meaning to the people of China, and no one wanted to start a massacre at this time. To welcome the festive season with the smell of blood was a bad omen, regardless of whether it was to an individual or to the dynasty. After the end of the Inshur Rebellion, Feng Xiuhuang successfully recruited Guizi and got what he wanted. On the day he returned to fallen Phoenix City, Guizi was appointed as the commander of the Blazing Flame Army by Feng Xiuhuang, and he received the rank of general, becoming the #1 person in the fallen Phoenix City Army. With the assistance of Old K, Zhou Bo, and Wang Xi, the Blazing Flame Army was extremely complete. With this army, Ouyang Shuo did not need to worry about Feng Xiuhuang. That morning, Ouyang Shuo was in the imperial study, reading through memorials. The few generals of the navy were still discussing, and there were many things that required Ouyang Shuo to coordinate, mobilize the resources of the entire dynasty, and escort the transformation of the navy. This was a core plan that concerned the fate of the dynasty, and Ouyang Shuo naturally had to accomplish it at all costs. Other than that, with the approach of the Spring Festival, the annual government official examination was also in full swing. The results of the examination were directly related to the promotion and demotion of government officials. Although Zhang Tingyu was there to oversee it, Ouyang Shuo still had to ask about it from time to time. This was especially so for the 4 provinces of Shu, Chuanbei, Xiangnan, and Jiangchuan. They had just been brought under the rule of the dynasty not long ago, and there was a huge gap between them and the old provinces. Before Shu, Chuanbei, and Xiangnan submitted, they did not use the same structure as Great Xia, and it would take a lot of effort just to adjust it. It was not to say that changing the name of an organization would change the thinking of the government officials. This matter was really complicated, and Ouyang Shuo specifically reminded Zhang Tingyu that the administration of personnel should use this examination as an opportunity to carry out a comprehensive reorganization of the 4 provinces. Those that did not meet the requirements would be dismissed, and they would not be tolerated. It was said that Zhang Tingyu was under a lot of pressure this time, and there were countless people who came to him to plead for leniency. The situation of this examination was not optimistic, and there were thousands of corruption, dereliction of duty, and abuse of power. It was really shocking, and if they did not take care of it, something big would happen. Not only the 4 new provinces, even the 4 old provinces of Yunnan, Chuannan, Lingnan, and Minnan also had all kinds of problems. When the forest was big, there were all kinds of birds. It could even be said that as Great Xia became richer and stronger, some places were already faintly giving birth to local tyrants. Even if Ouyang Shuo formulated a good system for the dynasty, it would not be able to prevent the greed of the people. Even though Ouyang Shuo believed that Zhang Tingyu, an old but firm official, would be able to withstand the pressure, he could not just stand by and watch. He had to show a clear attitude and support the work of the administration of personnel. Those who came to the capital to plead for leniency were not only the officials who failed the examination, but also their superiors, and it had already involved the prefectural governor. After all, if too many officials were fired from a prefecture, the prefectural governor would not be able to keep his face. Ouyang Shua's attitude was very firm, and he said to Zhang Tingyu, "Whoever wants to plead for leniency for their subordinates, tell them to look for me directly. I want to hear what kind of tricks they can come up with." Looking at the entire Great Xia, naturally, no one had the guts to do so. The moment Ouyang Shua's words spread, a large number of officials quietly left the capital the next day and returned to their provinces. They knew that the emperor was serious this time. All the old officials of the dynasty were respectful and afraid of the emperor. No one dared to disobey the emperor, as that would be courting death. With this round of updates, Gaia had given the NPCs higher intelligence and stronger selfish desires. It was bound to pose a harsh challenge to the entire officialdom. For this, Ouyang Shua specially summoned the imperial censor, Wei Zheng, and the head of the supervisory office. He ordered the two supervisory bodies to expand their manpower and increase the supervision of the local government offices. In secret, Ouyang Shua also exhorted the Mountain Sea Guard's commander, Shunbu Hai. At this point, some of Ouyang Shua's thoughts had already changed. He hoped to use the imperial censor and the supervisory office, which were on the surface, to implement a positive supervision of the officials. He did not want to use a spy agency like the Mountain Sea Guard. Since he had already ascended to the throne, Ouyang Shua did not want to instigate a reign of terror within the dynasty. That would not be a good thing. For this, Ouyang Shua specially warned Shunbu Hai to restrain the Mountain Sea Guard. Of course, they still had to supervise. Other than the supervision of the officials, there was also the control of the local affairs. The various provinces had set up the Governor-General's office, which reduced the workload of the imperial court. However, it also made it easy for the Governor-General to have thoughts that they should not have. As for how to balance the powerful relationship between the local governments and the imperial court, it would depend on Ouyang Shua's skill as the emperor. The vast dynasty spanned thousands of kilometers and had close to 100 million citizens. Naturally, it was not something that Ouyang Shua could look after alone. Therefore, Ouyang Shua needed the central organization of the cabinet to lead the civil officials. In addition to the newly appointed Yen Song, there were already 3 ministers in the cabinet. Each of them was an extremely experienced prime minister, and they were Ouyang Shua's strongest right-hand men. For this, Ouyang Shu even divided the work among the 3 ministers. Chapter 1001. Among the 3 ministers, the cabinet chief Jiang Shang was in charge of the overall situation and was equivalent to the prime minister. The second minister Ko Zhuan was in charge of the court, and the second minister Yen Song was in charge of the local affairs. The 3 of them worked together to make the huge state machinery of the Great Xia run smoothly. Ouyang Shua, the emperor, was above the cabinet and controlled the entire court. 22nd afternoon, Hall of Diligent Government. The 3 ministers, Jiang Shang, Ko Zhuan, and Yen Song, Xiao He, Wei Yang, family, and Du Ruhui, gathered together to finalize the 5-year budget of the Great Xia dynasty. Chun Bingguang, the head of the industry department, and Meng Jida, the head of the Bank of the 4 Seas, were also present. Ever since the founding of the dynasty, the financial management of the Great Xia dynasty had become more and more formal. Throughout the year, the amount of funds that the imperial court had saved, the large expenses for the next year, and the estimated revenue had to be finalized before the end of the year. They could no longer casually control the finances like before. At the end of the year, they had to calculate the budget set at the beginning of the year to clarify their responsibilities. Whosoever overspent would be punished with a flogging. Let's begin. Ouyang Shua sat on the throne and said calmly. Ever since he ascended to the throne, Ouyang Shua rarely took charge of the planning of the territory like he did when he was a lord. He would carefully plan everything and let the ministers carry it out. Now, Ouyang Shua only looked at the overall situation and spoke less and less. Firstly, there were many things that he did not need to say. The ministers would understand his intentions and act according to the rules. Secondly, Ouyang Shua was now the emperor, and his words could affect the fate of thousands of people. He was naturally cautious. Seeing this, Jiang Shang stepped forward and said, "Lord Fan, the finance department will first report last year's expenditure to the emperor before discussing next year's expenditure." Yes. Family stepped forward and reported. Thanks to the emperor's good fortune, the imperial court's revenue last year reached 65 million gold coins. The tax revenue was 51 million gold coins, and the corporation's revenue was 5 million gold coins. The corporation's revenue included the financial revenue of the Bank of the Four Seas, as well as the profits of the Shushan Steel Group and Hua Xia Shipping Group. A few days ago, under the leadership of Ouyang Shaw, the industry department followed the Shushan Iron and Steel Group and integrated artillery, warships, weapons and armors, simulating aircraft, firearms, and other military factories to jointly establish the Tsang Dragon Military Industry Group, which became the largest and most profitable group in the dynasty. The corporate restructuring of the Great Xia dynasty was in full swing, and it gradually became the economic pillar of the imperial court. The fiscal expenditure for the year is 61 million gold coins, including 21 million gold coins for public utilities, 5 million gold coins for the military, 12 million gold coins for administration, 5 million gold coins for subsidies, and 5 million gold coins for other expenses. Public expenditure, including basic welfare, education, medical care, infrastructure construction, agriculture, forestry, and water, accounted for the majority of the fiscal expenditure. Among the other expenses, there was one that was rather special. It was the expenses of the royal family. The maintenance fees of the Xia Palace, the salaries and expenses of the female officials and palace maids, the daily expenses of Ouyang Shua, Song Jia, Bing'er, and the other members of the royal family were all recorded in a complete account book. Including the expenses of the royal family meant that Ouyang Shua was not prepared to set up a private treasury outside of the national treasury. The private treasury of the royal family was separated from the national treasury. The national treasury's revenue was usually from agricultural and commercial taxes, while the private treasury's revenue was from monopolized industrial taxes, such as silk, tea, salt, and iron. In contrast, the Great Xia dynasty had long released the monopoly of silk, tea, and salt. With the signing of the iron or import agreement with Australia, the supervision of iron ore was gradually loosened. There was no way to talk about the industrial taxes. The private treasury of the royal family was used to support the members of the royal family and to repair the palace. Usually, there would be leftovers, and when the national treasury was insufficient, it would be used to replenish the national treasury. Of course, there were times when it was insufficient. Especially in the later period of the dynasty, the members of the royal family were huge, numbering in the tens of thousands. They were like a group of worms corroding the foundation of the dynasty. Every time the palace was repaired, a large amount of silver would be consumed. During the Jiajing period of the Ming dynasty, there was a fire in the palace. Just the repair of the palace alone cost 7 million taels of silver, which accounted for a small part of the Great Ming dynasty's revenue. The national treasury was generally used to pay salaries, repair roads, bridges, and irrigation works. During disaster years, it was also used for disaster relief. Of course, there were also extravagant emperors who transferred the money from the national treasury to the private treasury for personal enjoyment. In the later period of the Ming dynasty, this evil trend prevailed. The emperors were extravagant and licentious. They allowed eunuchs to use the name of the emperor to amass wealth, exploit the people, and embezzle the national treasury. Some emperors even colluded with corrupt officials to divide the stolen money or directly take the stolen money for themselves by confiscating the property. Many families were confiscated and destroyed. This made the royal family rich, but the people suffer, and the foundation of the dynasty was broken. Therefore, Ouyang Shua wanted to eliminate this malpractice from the beginning. Other than the funds allocated by the Ministry of Finance, the royal family actually had other sources of income. First, when Ouyang Shua went on expeditions, he would give some of the gold, silver, and jewelry he seized to the palace treasury. Second, Song Jia was in charge of the Shanghai Entertainment Holdings Group, which could generate considerable profits every year. With these two sources of income and the fact that there were only 3 members of the royal family, Ouyang Shuo naturally did not need to use the national treasury. Moreover, Ouyang Shuo had always advocated frugality in the royal family. Except for necessary occasions, they would never be extravagant and wasteful. As the saying went, follow the example of the leader. With Ouyang Shuo as the leader, the royal family advocated frugality, so the nobles naturally did not dare to be too extravagant. The entire dynasty was a way to prosperity. With a balance of income and expenditure, the imperial court would only save 4 million gold coins in a year. Of course, in the eyes of the outside world, it was already an impressive achievement for Great Xia to have millions of soldiers, launch 3 to 4 wars a year, and achieve financial savings. On a global scale, more than half of the territories could no longer make ends meet. They could only constantly increase taxes, issue national debt, and other methods to barely maintain the operations of the territories. After the 5th system update, the slower construction speed, more realistic disaster system, smarter citizens, and more intense global competition would make it even harder for these territories to survive in Gaia in the next 5 years. If they were not careful, they might even incur a calamity. Yin-Huang alliance had suffered several defeats in a row, and their foundation was almost wiped out. Thankfully, with the opening of the Yin-Huang alliance to the North American sea route, with their talent in business, they were able to recover quickly. The 4 million gold coins that Di Chan spent at the auction was probably paid for by his family. With Handan City's financial situation, it was impossible for them to fork out such money. After discussing last year's income and expenditure, family continued, according to the Ministry of Finance's analysis, there are 4 major benefits for Gaia in the next 5 years. Firstly, the integration of the 4 new provinces will be completed, which will greatly increase the imperial court's tax revenue. Secondly, Songlong Military Industry Group and other groups will go through internal integration and gradually go on the right track, which will contribute even more impressive profits. Thirdly, industrialization will begin, and the production efficiency of private workshops will greatly increase, which will stimulate the growth of commercial taxes. Fourthly, the implementation of the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement and Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership Agreement will further stimulate ocean trade and increase tariffs. Combining the above benefits, the Ministry of Finance's preliminary estimates that next year's financial revenue will reach a new level. It is estimated to reach 95 million gold coins, or even exceed 100 million, achieving an increase of more than 46%. Ouyang Shuo was non-committal when he heard this. A growth rate of 46% might seem amazing, but it was built on the foundation of the dynasty's constant expansion of territory and not an internal growth force. It was definitely not sustainable. Thinking of the few wars in Gaia in the next 5 years, the imperial court's finances would not be easy. Seeing this, Jiang Shang squinted his eyes and said, although the Ministry of Finance's estimates are very optimistic, next year's expenditure will also increase by a level. Let's discuss the major expenditure plans of the 4 major departments. The Prime Minister of the Cabinet naturally paid attention to the king's every move. After Jiang Shang finished speaking, the Minister of the Interior, Xiao He, was the first to step forward. In the expenditure of public utilities, other than the basic welfare expenditure under the jurisdiction of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the remaining public expenditures were mostly led by the Executive Yuan. Together with the administrative expenditure, which accounted for the majority of the expenditure, the Executive Yuan had the largest share of the 4 major departments. It even exceeded the Privy Council, which spent money like water. On the surface, the Executive Yuan did not make any direct financial contributions. As such, it was not difficult to understand the pressure Xiao he was under. However, what needed to be said still had to be said. Next year, the Science, Education, and Health Bureau will promote basic education and basic medical care in the 4 major provinces. The Agriculture Bureau will dredge the Water Conservancy, and the Construction Bureau will expand the road network. Public expenditures are expected to increase by another 4 million gold coins. Ouyang Shua asked, "Has the executive yuan sent anyone to investigate the situation of the public infrastructure in the four major provinces?" Yes. Overall, the foundations of the four major provinces are still relatively good. It is just that they were not unified in the past, so there's a need for a unified plan. Some of the construction standards also need to be in line with the imperial court. Tell Jia Sixi that before spring, make the best use of the time to organize the people to dredge the water conservancy. Counties that have the conditions should open up more farmland. Do not let the land go to waste. Yes, Xiao He hurriedly responded. The matter that the king had personally instructed probably had a deeper meaning. It was not an exaggeration to place great importance on it. However, Ouyang Shua made the connection to Gaia's updated calamity system, so he instructed the Agriculture Bureau to make early preparations. As the dynasty's industrialization accelerated and commerce prospered, the number of people engaged in handicrafts constantly increased. This created a very serious problem. The number of people engaged in agricultural production was weakened. With the relatively backward farming techniques of ancient times, to ensure a sufficient food supply, there needed to be a corresponding amount of farmland. More importantly, there needed to be a sufficient number of farmers to farm. Without pesticides, fertilizers, and hybrid rice to aid in agriculture, it was impossible to produce any miracles to greatly increase the yield per moo. The only way was to invest a large number of farmers into farming. Therefore, in the three major sectors of agriculture, commerce, and industry, there needed to be a holistic consideration. Chapter 1002. When it was Internal Affairs Minister Wei Yang's turn to report, Ouyang Shua reminded him, "Tell Pei Yun that the Civil Affairs Bureau will urge the various counties to stock up on disaster relief rations. This will be used as one of the assessment criteria for civil affairs officials. In addition, the Imperial Court will take out 1 million gold coins to set up a disaster relief emergency fund. It will be managed by the Civil Affairs Bureau in case of emergencies." Since Gaia had announced the natural disaster system, it was impossible for it to not take action. In the past 4 years, the wilderness had good weather, and there were basically no disasters. Even Great Xia had neglected disaster relief and was not prepared. It was as though good weather was a matter of course. That was why Ouyang Shua specially brought it up. Understood. Although Wei Yang had some doubts, he still nodded in agreement. Following that, Finance Minister Fan Li mainly talked about Gaia's financial transfer payments. Fortunately, the Imperial Court had no intention of inciting a civil war in Gaia's 5th year, so there would not be a huge increase in subsidies. Most of it was on the purchase of iron ore. Previously, the domestic iron ore was only mining costs. Purchasing from Australia required real money, including coal and other metal ores. It was estimated that they would need to prepare 8 million gold coins. Although this expenditure was basically the accounts of Shushan Iron and Steel Group and Songlong Military Industry Group, it was real money that had to be prepared. Currently, there were only 8 territories left in China. Yanwang Alliance and Fallen Phoenix City were self-sufficient in weapons and equipment, so they would not place any orders with Great Xia. Basically, they could only use it internally. Of course, the highlight was still the Privy Council. The huge military expenditure had always been criticized by Fan Li, the Minister of Finance. Du Ruhui, the Minister of Military Affairs, had long been trained to be thick-skinned. She remained unmoved and said straightforwardly, "Next year, a few wars can be predicted, including the war against Annam, the war against Dongying, and the battle for the Hawaiian Islands. There are also a few wars that cannot be predicted. For example, the war against South Korea and Chinla near Annam. Whether to fight or not can only be decided after the war in Annam. There are also Sri Lanka, South Africa, and Algeria, where the Moroccan royal family is hiding. They are all unstable factors that can incite war at any time. Then there is the domestic issue. If the Yanhuang Alliance attacks West Chu, we won't be able to guarantee that we will also be involved. How we fight and how far we fight will all depend on the situation. There's also the problem of the Tibetan Empire, the Western Turks, the three royal cities of Chuanzhou, Dali, and Chengdu, as well as the foreseeable problems of Western Xia and Mongolia. There are too many uncertainties. Du Ruhui went on, but Fan Li's face grew darker and darker. If things went on like this, no matter how much money the finance department earned, it wouldn't be enough for the army. But every word that Du Ruhui said was reasonable, making Fan Li unable to refute. He did not finish his words. It can be predicted that Gaia will need to expand its army by more than 300,000 in the next 5 years. At the very least, it will need to fill the gap of 1 legion in the Imperial Guards, as well as 3 legions in the Flying Bear Army. Then there's the matter of changing the Navy's equipment, especially the 3 ocean-going fleets. Changing their equipment is imminent, and this is a huge expense. The Privy Council estimates that Gaia's military budget for the next 5 years is at least 28 million. Du Ruhui's words were not groundless. Although Gaia only needed to expand its army by about 300,000 in 5 years, its military expenditure had increased by 10 million gold coins. It was somewhat unimaginable. In fact, the Soaring Eagle Army and the Flying Bear Army were only established at the end of Gaia's 4th year. As for the Imperial Guards, City Guards, and other army groups, they were only formed in the second half of the year. Therefore, these troops did not take up an entire year's military expenditure. Of Gaia's military expenditure of 18.5 million in 4 years, less than half was spent on the battlefield, post-war pensions, and military reorganization. By Gaia's 5th year, the massive military expenditure began to show its might. When Fan Li and company heard this, they could not help but draw a gasp. According to this calculation, even if Gaia's revenue reached 100 million gold coins in 5 years, there would probably not be much left over. It could even be said that a single mishap could result in a deficit. It was no wonder Fan Li's expression turned ugly. The financial pressure was on him, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. However, Ouyang Shuo remained unperturbed. Let me add that in the future, the Navy will have to purchase more than 2 million gold coins worth of magic crystals from Lemuria every year. This expenditure will also be included in the military budget. Fan Li was already numb and speechless. If the purchase of iron ore was included in the military expenditure, then the entire military budget would take up 40% of the fiscal revenue. It was a terrifying ratio. This was something that could not be helped. The world was not at peace, and war was inevitable. Military expenditure naturally rose with the tide. Even in times of peace, Russia's military expenditure in the 21st century still took up about 14% of the fiscal expenditure. Speaking of which, Ouyang Shuo had already placed great emphasis on controlling the size of the military. Not only had he greatly reduced the local garrison divisions, he had also eliminated a large number of soldiers. If not, the Imperial Guards and Flying Bear Army would have long been at full strength. After finalizing the budget, Ouyang Shuo concluded, "The dynasty's present achievements are all thanks to all of your sincerity and loyalty to the country. However, on the path of hegemony, one must advance or fall back. I will need all of you to continue working hard to prepare the annual budget before the Spring Festival holiday." "Yes, Your Majesty." The ministers responded loudly, their expressions excited. Court dismissed. Ouyang Shuo was the first to get up and walk toward the rear hall. "Farewell, Your Majesty." Only when Ouyang Shuo was completely gone did the ministers disperse. Along the way, there were also groups of 2s and 3s chatting. There seemed to be differences in intimacy. Out of all the ministers, the newly appointed minister, Yin Song, was the loneliest. He slowly walked up the marble steps by himself. Out of all the ministers, Yin Song, the evil minister, was the most controversial. Ouyang Shuo's arbitrary decision to send Yin Song to the cabinet caused the ministers to complain. People like Wei Zheng and Hai Rui were even more indignant. Especially Hai Rui, the county governor of Jingzhou. Not only was he from the same generation as Yin Song, he even had direct contact with him. Hai Rui had also contributed a lot to the overthrow of Yin in history. After finding out that Yin Song had entered the cabinet, Hai Rui had even written a letter to Ouyang Shua. However, Ouyang Shua simply replied with one sentence. "Do you think I am Emperor Jiajing?" Hai Rui was immediately silenced. After being in Great Xia for a few years, Hai Rui of course knew that Great Xia was worlds apart from the Great Ming Dynasty. Their Majesties' martial arts were rarely matched. He was comparable to the Qin Emperor and Han Wu. Comparing their Majesty to Emperor Jiajing was an insult, no matter how they thought about it. Hai Rui could only understand that their Majesty valued Yin Song's talent and would not be like Emperor Jiajing, who allowed the Yin father and son to wield power. Later, when they found out that their Majesty strictly forbade Yin Shifan from entering the officialdom, Hai Rui was both ashamed and excited. They bowed to the north and said with deep emotion, "Father is wise." Yin Song did not seem to care about the criticism from the outside world. He continued to familiarize himself with the Great Xia officialdom. As time passed and Yin Song didn't do anything out of line, the criticism naturally lessened. Moreover, it was an extremely dangerous thing to talk about the cabinet elder. Not being criticized did not mean they were close. Just by looking at Yin Song's lonely figure, it was obvious. Ouyang Shua returned to the imperial study. As soon as he sat down, Qingyi handed him a cup of hot tea. The two of them had a tacit understanding. "Thank you." Ouyang Shua smiled. To Qingyi, he was half a subject and half a friend. The relaxed atmosphere in the imperial study was exactly what Ouyang Shua liked. He did not want to put on the airs of Emperor Xia in front of the officials. That was too tiring. Ouyang Shua rubbed his head and thought about the court discussion just now. It was strange. Among the 7 officials, Jiang Shang was from the Western Zhou, Ko Zhuan from the Northern Song, Yin Song from the Ming Dynasty, Xiao He from the Han Dynasty, Wei Yang from the Warring States period, Fan Li from the Spring and Autumn period, and Du Ruhui from the Tang Dynasty. None of them came from the same dynasty. Vaguely, there seemed to be a group of people gathering behind them. The veins of the factions in the court were starting to become clear. Ouyang Shua also saw Xiao He and the others alienating Yin Song intentionally or unintentionally. Other than the factions, there is also the fight between the pure and the muddy. Ouyang Shua was now very satisfied with the method of putting Yin Song into the cabinet. Even though it was a pool of stagnant water, it might not have any vitality. Only a catfish could muddy the water. Yin Song was that catfish. Other than this, Ouyang Shua could faintly see the shadow of the 100 schools of thought. Jiang Shang was the ancestor of the 100 schools of thought. Ko Zhuan represented the Confucian school. Xiao He had the shadow of Taoism. Wei Yang was the legalist. Fan Li was the merchant. And Du Ruhui was the militarist. The clash of ideologies of the various schools created the prosperity and enlightenment of the Great Xia. Through this court discussion, Ouyang Shua seemed to understand something, but at the same time, he did not. As for the annual budget itself, it was not the true core matter. Grand Xia's Gaia financial income was estimated to reach 100 million gold coins in 5 years. This was a wealth that 99% of adventurers would not be able to obtain even if they worked hard their entire lives. They did not even dare to think about it. As the saying goes, those who do not manage the household do not know the price of oil and salt. The Great Xia was a huge household. It earned a lot, but it also spent a lot. This household was not as easy to manage as the outside world imagined. As the head of the household, Ouyang Shua had to be impartial. He had heard that there were already ministers in the court discussing in secret, hoping that the imperial court would shift its focus from external conquest to internal affairs. They wanted to prioritize internal affairs while the military took a back seat. Ouyang Shua did not know how many of these thoughts were sincerely for the dynasty's future, and how many were for their own selfish motives. It was inevitable that a general's status and prestige would be greatly increased when they went on a campaign against the outside world. There was no need to talk about commanders like Bai Qi and Han Xin. Although they did not enter the imperial court, their status was vaguely equal to that of ministers, or even slightly higher. Even an army commander was filled with confidence and domineering aura. In comparison, the civil officials appeared somewhat weak. Ignoring everything else, just in terms of nobility, the generals far surpassed the civil officials. If the imperial court shifted its focus from external conquest to internal construction, it would naturally increase the weight of the entire group of civil officials, and every civil official would benefit from this. Therefore, although the imperial court appeared peaceful on the surface, undercurrents were surging. Just as Ouyang Shuo was deep in thought, a guard came to report. Your Majesty, the Mountain Sea Guard's commander, Shun Buhai, wishes to see your Majesty for an urgent matter. Ouyang Shuo was taken aback, unsure of what had happened. Invite him in. Yes. Chapter 1003. The information that Shun Buhai brought surprised Ouyang Shuo. Li Mi is dead. After Pei Renji revealed Li Mi's whereabouts, the Shadow Guards launched a secret arrest on him. As a historical figure, before he joined any territory, Li Mi had the divine travel talisman on him and could escape at any time. Therefore, it was not easy for the Shadow Guards to capture Li Mi. Under the personal arrangement of Cui Tianqi, they finally captured Li Mi after more than a month. However, Li Mi was extremely stubborn and would rather die than surrender. Cui Tianqi had no choice but to execute Li Mi on the spot and find 2 items on his corpse. One was a name list of Li Mi's henchmen in the Sui dynasty. As one of the heroes of the late Sui dynasty, Li Mi had many allies in the Sui dynasty. Ouyang Shuo was shocked. The other was a treasure map. It was the eunuch Yang's treasury that had been circulating among the people for a long time. Interesting. Ouyang Shuo did not expect to receive such a surprise after killing Li Mi. He returned the name list to Shenbuhai and said, "Make a copy of this and send it to Yang Guang through a spy in Chuanzhou." With Yang Guang's personality and ambition, he would probably use this to stir up trouble in Chuanzhou. This was what Ouyang Shuo hoped for. Just as Du Ruhui said, Chuanzhou, Dali, and Qingdu were all hidden dangers. Ouyang Shuo had not thought a way to cure them and could only infiltrate them slowly. As for the treasure map of eunuch Yang's treasury, it was a little troublesome. Looking at the map, the treasury was in Chang'an City. Now that Li Shimin was in Chang'an City, the Mountain Sea Guards did not dare to dig for treasures in the city. After some thought, Ouyang Shuo wrote a letter to his aunt, Lin Jing. There's good news, come quickly. It was more convenient for adventurers to do things in the royal city. Seeing that it was already 6 o'clock, Ouyang Shuo gave up on the idea of killing Wang Bodong. On the morning of the 23rd, Lin Jing rushed to the Xia Palace. Shuo, what good news do you have for me? In the entire world, only Lin Jing dared to speak to Ouyang Shuo like this. According to the rules, Lin Jing was a relative of the Great Xia dynasty and had a high status. Ouyang Shuo also thought of giving his aunt the title of Marquis, but she rejected it. What did he mean by it wasn't time yet? Ouyang Shuo did not mind. He handed over the treasure map to eunuch Yang's warehouse and said with a smile, "Take a look. Treasure map." The more Lin Jing looked, the brighter his eyes became. Eunuch Yang's warehouse is in Chang'an City. I think it would be more convenient for you to send someone to retrieve the treasures, Ouyang Shuo explained. Other than being able to move around easily without attracting the attention of the Great Tang Imperial Court, adventurers also carried storage pouches with them, allowing them to move the entire treasury without anyone noticing. Even if there were traps or ghosts in the treasure vault, the elites of Snow Rose will be able to deal with them easily. This was what they had been doing since they entered the game. Everyone had their own strengths. Tell me, how are you going to split it? Lin Jing was very straightforward. Even if the 2 of them were relatives, public affairs were public affairs, and private affairs were private affairs. Even blood brothers would settle their accounts clearly. Lin Jing naturally wouldn't directly take possession of the treasure map. In that case, why would Ouyang Shuo inform her if there was another good thing in the future? Rumor has it that there are many weapons and treasures in eunuch Yang's warehouse. There might even be other treasures. I don't want the weapons. You just need to convert the treasures into gold coins and give me a portion. Ouyang Shuo was very generous. Eunuch Yang was referring to the Sui dynasty's Duke of Chu, Yang Su. He was currently serving in Great Sui, and Ouyang Shuo naturally wasn't interested in Yang Su's weapons and equipment. Ouyang Shuo, on the other hand, was in need of money. He still hadn't used the contract beast's wishing stone. Lin Jing smiled in satisfaction. Then it's settled. Wait for my news. As he spoke, he ignored Ouyang Shuo and went straight to the harem to talk to Bang Er. Ouyang Shuo was helpless. His aunt was born with a dislike for men. It was already rare for her to talk so much with Ouyang Shuo. After returning to the imperial study, Ouyang Shuo summoned Du Hui. Li Mi has been executed. From the letters found on Li Mi, he indeed had an ulterior motive in arranging for Wang Bodong to serve us. Talk to Wang Bodong. If he's willing to forget his old master and serve us wholeheartedly, that would be the best. I can let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, hand him over to the Ministry of Military Justice for trial and execution. Understood. Du Hui was also very straightforward. For the next 2 days, Ouyang Shuo stared at the Navy generals and finally finalized the Great Xi'an Navy program. The generals also returned to their respective stations. On the morning of the 25th, the matter of Wang Bodong was settled. After learning that Li Mi had been executed, Wang Bodong wanted to act violently against Du Hui on the spot, but was arrested by the guards. There is no doubt that he was a good man who was loyal to his master. Unfortunately, he couldn't be used by Great Xia. On the same day, the Ministry of Military Justice executed Wang Bodong on charges of espionage and insubordination. Wang Bodong's death set off a small wave in the city guards, especially the second corps of the city guards where Wang Bodong was. There were many officers and soldiers who were close to Wang Bodong and admired his peerless archery skills. With Wang Bodong's death, the officers and soldiers were naturally worried that they would be implicated. The Ministry of Military Justice's Chief Feng Yinshan requested for instructions on how to deal with these suspicious officers and soldiers and whether to arrest all of them and strictly interrogate them to see if anyone was bewitched by Wang Bodong. Ouyang Shuo received the report and used the approaching Spring Festival as an excuse to not increase the number of killings. He gently let bygones be bygones and did not pursue anyone. He believed that even if there were officers and soldiers who were close to Wang Bodong, after the deaths of Li Mi and Wang Bodong, no one would be stupid enough to go against Great Xia and do anything irrational. If they really pursued it, it would instead cause panic. The army couldn't always be strict. Sometimes they could show kindness and be lenient. It might even have a miraculous effect. Without the psychological burden, those officers and soldiers would naturally think of ways to serve the imperial court. Shan Xiongxin, who served in the Somali Corps, was very sad when he learned about Li Mi and Wang Bodong. Wang Bodong was a hero and loyal. He shouldn't have such a miserable ending. The bad thing was that he followed the wrong master and was cheated twice in a row. Even if he won a good reputation, so what? The dead Wang Bodong was just a pile of archived data. But the living Wang Bodong could display his talents in the future Hope Planet. It was really a world of difference. Gaia Year 5, 3rd of February, 15th of December. It would be Lunar New Year's Eve in half a month. The festive atmosphere in Shanghai City was getting more and more intense. There were lanterns and streamers everywhere, and the streets were bustling with people. The government was also busy wrapping up the government affairs for the year and waiting for the arrival of the Spring Festival holiday. According to Great Xia's system, the Spring Festival holiday lasted 7 days, 3 days before and 3 days after the festival. Lin Jing arrived at Shanghai City again at 9 in the morning. Looking at the happy expression on his aunt's face, Ouyang Shuo knew that eunuch Yang's treasury must have been obtained. Anne is indeed extraordinary, Ouyang Shuo said with a smile. Lin Jing laughed heartily. We've really struck it rich this time. As he spoke, Lin Jing vividly described the treasure hunting experience of the Snow Rose elite team. Chong and was the sphere of influence of the embroidered uniform guards and belonged to the Yellow Emperor Alliance. In order to conceal it, Lin Jing had to arrange for the members to be teleported to Chong and in batches. Fortunately, with the opening of the satellite cities, the guilds focused their attention on the underground world. After the elite team arrived in Chong, and they followed the map and found the location of the treasure, but it was an abandoned house. Lin Jing simply went all the way and spent money to rent the house. What happened next was much smoother. Through an ancient well in the house, the elite team successfully entered the treasury. It was indeed filled with traps. Even though Lin Jing brought along experts who were proficient in gear techniques, 6 of the 50 elite team members still died. Fortunately, after the Gaia update, the cost of players reincarnating was greatly reduced. With Snow Rose's foundation and the control of the Jenya satellite city, it was not difficult to find a few experience pills and training pills. The members who died in battle would be able to make a comeback very quickly. Of course, this was only the elite team's treatment. Ever since the system update, the experience pills and training pills dropped and the underground world became very popular, and the supply could not meet the demand. For example, the top 10 guilds, Snow Rose, even consciously arranged for people to sweep the market. Regardless of whether they needed it or not, once someone sold it, it would be bought by the top 10 guilds and hoarded. As such, more than 90% of the pills in the market would end up in the hands of the top 10 guilds. Only they had the wealth to purchase these pills in unlimited quantities. As for loners, apart from a few lucky ones, even if they saw pills after reincarnation, they would not be able to afford them. It was very unfair, but it was the reality. The game world followed the law of the jungle, where the strong preyed on the weak and the fittest survived. Gaia wanted to nurture warriors. Other than the traps, there was a boss in the treasury. It was none other than evil King Shi Xuan. After a bitter battle, nearly all the elite team members were killed before we finally killed Evil King. Although Lin Jing described it casually, Ouyang Shuo could imagine the tragedy of the battle. Thankfully, the huge number of casualties was exchanged for returns that exceeded expectations. Evil King Shi Xuan's cultivation techniques, Divine One-Heart technique, Phantasm movement technique, and Undying pressing technique, all of which were Emperor-grade and priceless. He even obtained a special item, Evil Emperor Relic. Gaia's Evil Emperor Relic also contained a huge amount of true origin, which could be slowly absorbed by players and turned into their own true origin, greatly increasing their personal cultivation. It was truly an amazing treasure. In comparison, the weapons and treasures in the treasury were not as eye-catching. Not eye-catching did not mean that they were worthless. There were a large number of weapons and armors in the treasury, each of which was of high quality. Moreover, many of them were custom-made for martial artists. To Snow Rose, it was undoubtedly a huge fortune, and it could greatly enrich the guild warehouse. There was no lack of dark gold equipment, and even purple gold equipment, which were even more valuable. With this batch of equipment, the overall strength of Snow Rose's combat team would rise to another level. Little Shuo, this is the best New Year's gift you can give your aunt, Lin Jing said with a smile. Chapter 1004. Lin Jing took out a golden ball the size of a fist. It was the Evil Emperor Relic. Little Shuo, we discussed it. The weapons and equipment in the treasury are already worth a lot. Including the 3 manuals, we've taken too much. You can have the Evil Emperor Relic. Saying that, Lin Jing handed over the relic. Ouyang Shuo smiled and pushed the relic back. What are you doing? Lin Jing was puzzled. Take it. Aunt, you need this relic more than me. I'm looking forward to you shining in the World Martial Tournament and winning glory for the country. Ouyang Shuo laughed. It had been 5 years since Gaia, and the first round of the World Martial Tournament was in full swing. Ouyang Shuo had no doubt that Lin Jing had the ability to squeeze into the top 10 of the Jenya region. But to say that he would definitely win the national finals and represent the China region in the global finals, even Lin Jing himself did not have full confidence. China region had always been crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Who knew what kind of peerless experts were hidden in the wilderness? Especially the opening of sects, it could create miracles. Excluding the dark horses, China region's 9 great king cities and the only Lord's capital city, Shanghai City, had a total of 10 major regions. Star State County, Somalia Province, and Morocco Province were also considered as additional regions. Each had 5 places to advance. Otherwise, it would be too unfair to the adventurers of these three regions. To compete for the top 10 regions in China region, one had to be first in the region. Not to mention standing on the highest stage of the global martial tournament, competing with the world's top experts, and competing for the title of the world's #1 expert. For adventurers, that was the ultimate pursuit of their life. At this time, every increase in strength for adventurers meant a higher chance of winning. Why would Ouyang Shuo want the evil emperor relic? There was an ancient saying, "A gentleman helps others achieve their dreams." Moreover, the person in front of him was one of Ouyang Shuo's few close relatives. Lin Jing's eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. He smiled brightly. "All right, I'll accept it." Lin Jing obviously knew how heavy this gift was. Even if it was a close relative, it was extremely precious. A warm current flowed in Lin Jing's heart. This had nothing to do with the demonic emperor relic, but was a genuine concern for one's family, as well as a trace of anticipation. Ouyang Shuo also smiled brilliantly and formally issued an invitation. "Little Aunt, on this year's New Year's Eve, I'm preparing to hold a banquet in the palace for all the clansmen. I hope Little Aunt can also participate." Whether it was the Ouyang clan or Ouyang Shuo's mother, the Lin clan, of course, wasn't just Ouyang Shuo's group. There were also many distant relatives. Roughly counting, there were about 100 of them. If the side branches and relatives were included, there would be 300 to 400 people. In recent years, as Ouyang Shuo's identity became public, more and more relatives came to Shanghai City to seek shelter. Ouyang Shuo didn't shut the door on them, but arranged them properly according to their specialties. To this day, the Ouyang clan and the Lin clan had settled down in Shanghai City. These people could all be considered relatives of the emperor. Ouyang Shuo had comprehended a principle a long time ago. If one wanted to rule over a dynasty, one couldn't condone the imperial family's misdeeds, yet one couldn't shut them out as well. It could even be said that, in a sense, it was precisely because of the support of a large-scale imperial family that the stability of the dynasty could be maintained and passed down from generation to generation. Sometimes, blood ties were the strongest and most loyal kind of trust. It was absolutely not unnecessary to put the imperial family in an important position. What Ouyang Shuo wanted to do was to use them according to their abilities. Those who were talented would be put to important positions to gain experience in order to achieve great things. Those who were mediocre could also be conferred titles of nobility and become idlers in times of prosperity. In this way, they would form a stable social class that would jointly protect the royal power. Ouyang Shuo had already prepared to give a large number of titles to his relatives before the Spring Festival, including 3 marquises, 12 earls, 20 viscounts, and 35 barons. After listening to Ouyang Shuo's plan, Lin Jing was silent for a long time with a complicated expression. "Little Shuo, you've really grown up. You're a real man, the leader of the Ouyang clan, the pillar. If your parents could see your current achievements, they would definitely be very gratified." Ouyang Shuo held back his tears and raised his head to look at the sky. He prayed silently in his heart. "Dad, Mom, are you doing well in heaven?" Who knew that he was actually a child who occasionally needed his parents' comfort and encouragement? Seeing this, Lin Jing suddenly took a step forward and gave Ouyang Shuo a hug. Ouyang Shuo was stunned, then he smiled like a child. He rarely experienced this kind of warmth. Lin Jing stepped back, tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. "I'll come on New Year's Eve with Xian." Ouyang Shuo nodded heavily. "All right, I almost forgot about the important matter." Lin Jing quietly wiped away the tears at the corners of his eyes and transferred 3 million gold coins to Ouyang Shuo on the spot. "This is the money after the conversion of the treasures in Eunuch Yang's warehouse." This time, Ouyang Shuo accepted it calmly. After sending off his aunt, Ouyang Shuo returned to the harem. Praying for a divine beast with a pair of unborn children was naturally done with Song Jia. Contract Beast Wishing Stone 1/1. Pray with gold coins to randomly summon a contract beast egg. Friendly reminder: wild beasts start at 1,000 gold coins, spirit beasts start at 10,000 gold coins, Quasi-divine bees start at 100,000 gold coins, and divine bees start at 1 million gold coins. The white stone looked ordinary, but it hid a mysterious power. Let's begin. Song Jia was also full of anticipation. Ouyang Shuo nodded, held the wishing stone, and said in his heart, "Use." System notification. Player detected that saying nothing is using contract beast wishing stone. Pray once. Do you want to start praying? Yes. System notification. Please choose the type of prayer. Divine beast. With Ouyang Shuo's status, if he wanted to choose, he would naturally choose the best. System notification. The minimum amount of prayer for a divine beast is 1 million gold coins. Please choose the amount of gold coins to pray. Friendly reminder. The more gold coins you invest, the more precious the divine beast will be. The upper limit is 5 million gold coins. 5 million gold coins! Ouyang Shuo didn't hesitate. Other than the 3 million gold coins sent by his aunt, Lin Jing, Song Jia, as his mother, also transferred 3 million gold coins from Mountain and Sea Entertainment Holdings Corporation for emergencies. He didn't expect that it would really be used. In the fourth year of Gaia, Mountain and Sea Entertainment Holdings Corporation made a huge profit with 5 movies, including Hua Tsubing, Hua Mulan, and concerts. Their net profit reached 15 million gold coins. As a major shareholder, Song Jia also became a tycoon in China. However, a few ambitious female shareholders, including Song Jia, weren't satisfied with the current size of the group. They didn't plan to split the profits, but to invest the profits into the filming of a new movie. Because of the prayer, Song Jia temporarily transferred 3 million gold coins. System notification. Say your wish. Ouyang Shuo took a deep breath and said the wish that he had long prepared. I want to match a pair of most compatible divine beasts for my children who are about to be born. The wish was very vague, but the requirements were unusually high. Only the most suitable one was the best. System notification. Calculating wish. Please wait. At the same time, Gaia, who was in Sky City, suddenly opened his eyes. A pair of bright eyes pierced through the sky and directly looked at Ouyang Shuo in the Summer Palace. It's him. Gaia's eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. Gaia didn't seem to do anything, but in less than 15 minutes, Ouyang Shuo received a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player, not saying you have nothing. Your wish has been successful. You have spent 5 million gold coins and obtained a dragon egg and a phoenix egg. Congratulations. The wishing stone in Ouyang Shuo's hand turned into a white light and slowly rose into the sky. In the scorching white light, resplendent gold light and dazzling red light gradually shot out. The gold was dazzling and the red was noble. One was like gold and the other was like fire. What was even more strange was that a gold light and a red light suddenly shot out from the interweaving light. They entered Song Jia's stomach like lightning and disappeared. As the light dissipated, 2 divine beast eggs appeared, one big and one small. The big one was like a bucket, and the small one was like a watermelon. Ouyang Shuo went forward and wanted to check the attributes, but all he got was a series of? Could it be that they've already signed a contract? Ouyang Shuo was bewildered. Fortunately, Gaia never fooled players about this kind of thing. Since he had spent a huge sum of 5 million gold coins and an extremely precious wishing stone, it shouldn't be a big deal. Madam, keep it. Ouyang Shuo smiled. This was a mother's right. Song Jia nodded and kept the 2 eggs in her storage bag. 15th of February, Shanghai City. From tomorrow onwards, the imperial court would be on holiday, officially entering the Spring Festival. On this morning, the palace had sent out more than 50 imperial decrees through the cabinet. The recipients were all relatives of the emperor, from the highest second-class marquis to barons. The fast horses responsible for delivering the imperial decrees galloped through the streets and alleys of the capital. It was a very lively scene. Along with the imperial decrees, silk satin, gold, silver, and jewelry were also sent. It was the greatest New Year's congratulations to the emperor. With such an honor, it was enough to bring glory to the family. When the news spread, the entire country celebrated. To the people, The king's imperial decrees signified the prosperity of the royal family. Coupled with the queen's pregnancy, it could be said to be a double blessing, an omen of the dynasty's prosperity. As for worrying about the emperor's relatives being violent, there was no way to mention it. The king was wise and mighty, impartial, and deeply loved by the people. There is also a precedent of punishing the emperor's relatives, so he naturally would not be biased. On this point, the people of the capital were especially confident. As such, the festive atmosphere was pushed to its peak. Following that, another decree came from the palace. This year's 100 officials banquet would be held on the day before New Year's Eve. As such, the officials of the imperial court did not need to accompany the king, Ouyang Shah, in the palace on New Year's Eve, which was supposed to be a family reunion. It was extremely considerate. This was where Ouyang Shah was different from previous emperors. Ouyang Shah, who was deeply influenced by modern ideals, did not wish to put on a show of celebrating with the people and cause the officials to suffer. In history, when officials attended banquets, they would appear respectful on the surface and feel honored, but they were probably cursing in secret. No matter how great the honor was, it could not compare to having a family reunion dinner. Chapter 1005. In the blink of an eye, New Year's Eve had arrived. Yesterday, Ouyang Shah had hosted a banquet for the civil and military officials at the Xia Palace. Not only were the officials of the 5th rank and above attending the banquet, but there were also the 12 governors and 5 commanders who had gone to the capital to report on their work. The extravagance of the lineup left everyone dumbfounded. The governors and commanders were either in charge of a province or guarding a territory. They were all powerful figures in the imperial court and could be said to be high-ranking officials. Their trip to the capital was naturally not to simply reminisce about the past, but to carry a heavy responsibility. After the new year, Ouyang Shah would hold a court meeting. Xia Palace, Zhaohua Hall. Zhaohua Hall was located in the southwest corner of the palace. It was where Ouyang Shah hosted banquets. As it was the new year, the vast Xia Palace had already been decorated. Everywhere was decorated with lanterns and streamers. However, compared to the casual atmosphere among the commoners, the palace had more rules and a hint of solemnity. Everything had to be carried out according to royal etiquette. There was no room for mistakes. Thus, even on New Year's Eve, no one dared to play in the palace. Zhaohua Hall had already been set up with rosewood tables. On the tables were peanuts, walnuts, and various other dried fruits. What was even more strange was that in the middle of winter, there were bananas, pineapples, oranges, and other seasonal fruits. Looking at the sparkling and translucent skin, it looked like it had just been plucked. It was amazing. Of course, Great Xia did not have any greenhouse planting techniques, nor did they have modern refrigerators to keep things fresh. These fruits were all from the Morocco and Somaliland provinces. Occasionally, there were Southeast Asian fruits from Xingzhou County and fresh milk from Auckland. With the help of the teleportation array, anything could happen. The Xia Palace had fresh fruits from all over the year. Every morning, they could also drink fresh milk from Auckland. This was what it meant to be wealthy. There was an exquisite charcoal fire burning in the hall. Somali spices were lit, making people feel warm and dispelling the cold of winter. It was really comfortable. In the vast hall, the main members of the Ouyang clan, the core members of the Lin clan, and the core members of the Song family, led by Song Tianxiong, were all gathered together. There were no less than 100 people. The 2 brothers, Song Wen and Song Wu, were among them. Song Tianxiong's expression was a little strange. He originally hoped that his daughter, Song Jia, would give birth to a child to stabilize the position of the Song family. Who would have thought that His Majesty would play such a trick? Even among the relatives of the emperor, there were still differences between them. In the Ouyang clan, those who were of the same branch as Ouyang Shua's grandfather naturally had the highest status. After them were the collateral branches, followed by Ouyang Shua's mother's Lin clan and Song Jia's mother's Song clan. Everyone took their seats according to the meticulously arranged seating arrangement. There was a row of tables in the middle of the hall. There were only 4 seats for the guests of honor tonight. The closer the seat was to the VIP seat, the higher the status. At the banquet, there were old men and children of 5 or 6 years of age. No matter who it was, all of them were dressed in meticulously prepared clothes, especially those with noble titles. They were dressed in noble robes bestowed upon them by the emperor, causing others to be envious. Sitting in the hall, these people were both cautious and somewhat excited as they waited for the banquet to begin. From time to time, they would exchange a few words with their attendants, but none of them dared to speak loudly. The children, who were supposed to be noisy and frolicking, were restrained to their seats by their parents and could only squirm restlessly. At the right corner, a youth around the age of 11 or 12 cautiously broke off an orange banana from the table and said with envy, "Big Brother Shua is really amazing. You could buy any kind of food." It seemed that he was a little glutton. "It's good that you know. You have to study well so that you can help your brother in the future." Sitting beside the youth, the father looked at his son dotingly as he earnestly exhorted him. For the Ouyang clan, this surprise was like falling from the sky. This youth's father was called Ouyang Gong. Because he worked in a bank in real life, he was arranged to work in the Bank of the Four Seas. It was said that he was highly regarded by Meng Jida. Before the new year, Ouyang Gong was conferred the title of a second-class earl and could be considered one of the most outstanding people in the clan. For the adults of the Ouyang clan, as long as they were willing to work hard, they could walk several times, or even more than 10 times faster than ordinary people. Thinking of the envy and even flattery of his former superiors and colleagues, Ouyang Gong was filled with emotion. Ever since the king issued the imperial edict, his house was as crowded as a marketplace with an endless stream of guests. There were former colleagues, friends, classmates, and even strangers who only nodded their heads at him. As long as they had the slightest connection, they would all come to congratulate him. This was called when a man achieves the Tao. Even his chickens and dogs rise to the heavens. Ouyang Gong's mind was still clear and wasn't corroded by these sugar-coated bullets. He knew that the Ouyang clan could have today's glory all because of this nephew that he had yet to meet. Ouyang Gong was very clear about which was more important. He had heard that 2 of his cousins, who were very close to his nephew, had only been conferred the title of a baron of the 3rd rank due to their bad behavior. Without a doubt, this was a warning. Although Ouyang Gong was a generation older than his nephew, he could only sigh in admiration at his nephew's methods. At 6 o'clock in the evening, a female official sang, "The king has arrived." Wow! More than 100 guests in the hall all stood up and looked towards the northeast corner of the hall. They saw Ouyang Shaw, his wife Song Jia, his sister Bing, and his aunt Lin Jing leisurely walking over. Wang Shangan. Everyone cupped their hands in greeting. Ouyang Shua smiled slightly and came to the main seat. He pressed his hands down. "Today is a family banquet. There is no difference in status. There are my grandfathers, uncles, and nephews here. We are all family, so there is no need to be too restrained." After saying that, Ouyang Shua took the lead and sat down. Crash! The others followed suit and sat down. Their expressions were much more natural. Although they were all modern people and weren't bound by feudal ethics, when they were in a magnificent hall of the royal palace and saw the solemn female guards outside the hall and the female officials and maids standing on the side, they were unconsciously brought into a solemn atmosphere. No one felt that there was anything wrong with this. On the contrary, this was a kind of glory, the glory of the clan. They seemed to foresee that the Ouyang clan would also be like the legendary Emperor clan, shining in the 9 regions. When the banquet started, there were maids serving plates of delicious food. Among the younger generation, Ouyang Shua would personally give a red envelope to the younger generation and put it on the tray for good luck. There were bands playing on both sides, and in the middle of the hall, there was singing and dancing to liven things up. Not long after the banquet started, Ouyang Shua raised his cup. Immediately, the drumming stopped and the hall became quiet. It was the first time for many of them to see this legendary figure, so they couldn't help but feel curious. Ouyang Shua stood up. "Today is New Year's Eve, a day for family reunion. It's really not easy for us to gather together. Yesterday's great Xia has become the past. Tomorrow's great Xia will depend on everyone's help. I propose a toast to everyone." As he spoke, Ouyang Shu emptied the cup in one gulp. This was the clearest expression Ouyang Shua had made towards the position of the clan, and everyone present, especially the adult men, had excited expressions as they gulped down the wine in their cups, carefree and unrestrained. Thus, the banquet reached its climax. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Everyone, there's no need to be reserved. Just stay in your seats and relax a little." As he said that, he personally led his wife Song Jia and Bing to the front row for a toast. Today, Song Jia didn't wear the queen's robes. Instead, she wore casual clothes because she didn't want to create a sense of alienation. Bing was wearing a snow-white classic princess dress, slim and elegant. Although she was usually naughty and mischievous, in this kind of situation, she was able to grasp the palace etiquette perfectly. One look, and you could tell that she had received a good education. When the bystanders saw this, they couldn't help but sigh. Everyone in this family was a dragon and phoenix among men. It was impossible to not admire them. They could be said to be the model of the royal family. Sitting in the front row were the elders of the clan, and the three marquises were impressively there. The elder with the highest rank was called Ouyang Bo, and he was the elder brother of Ouyang Shua's grandfather. In terms of seniority, Ouyang Shua also had to call him grandfather. He could be considered the elder closest to the bloodline of the clan. However, this grandfather's health wasn't good. He was thin and his face was full of wrinkles. "Grandfather, Happy New Year." Ouyang Shua smiled as he raised his cup. Song Jia naturally followed her husband's tune. During the wedding, there weren't many people from the Ouyang clan. This time, Song Jia could be considered to have met her in-laws. Ouyang Bo's face was brimming with a kind smile. He trembled as he patted Ouyang Shua's hand and said with a smile, "Beautiful son and beautiful wife. Good, good." Ouyang Shua nodded heavily. Perhaps it was at this moment that he felt the strength and warmth of the clan. The banquet lasted until 7:30 in the evening. After the reunion dinner, everyone moved to the Imperial Garden to watch the fireworks display and to drink and have fun. The children were frolicking happily on the grass. On this night, the Imperial Garden was brightly lit. As the host, Binger once again became the king of children. She led a group of cousins to have fun in the Imperial Garden. One moment, they went to the lake to look at the goldfish, and the next moment, they went to provoke the pandas. They were carefree. Hearing Binger's crisp laughter from afar, Ouyang Shua gave a knowing smile. Binger was lonely. As Ouyang Shua's status rose, Binger, the only princess of a direct line of descent, naturally became the focus of attention. The teachers who taught her also became stricter. In Shanghai City, the children who had been following Binger had also gradually dispersed. The difference in status between them was like heaven and earth. It was destined that they could no longer peacefully get along with Binger. Even if the children wanted to, their parents would repeatedly warn them not to be disrespectful to their lord and to give in to her highness. As time passed, they gradually drifted apart. Hua Qingjun, the only one who was about the same age as Binger, was always by his father Hua Guang's side, so he had no chance to see her. When she was really bored, Binger could only be with a group of spirit beasts and talk to herself. Sometimes when Ouyang Shua saw her, he couldn't help but feel distressed. He didn't know whether today's encounter was good or bad for Binger. This wasn't the reason why Ouyang Shua was willing to accept all of his clansmen. Perhaps Binger could only truly have fun with her cousins. Being connected by blood was the most unrestrained. With this laughter, everything is worth it, Ouyang Shua thought to himself. Because Song Jia was pregnant, she returned to the palace early to rest. Ouyang Shua stood in the pavilion and chatted with the elders. He told them about his struggles over the past few years. After a while, the elders were tired and went back to their own rooms. The curtain fell on the family banquet just like that. Chapter 1006. On the first day of the first lunar month in Shanghai City. According to tradition, The imperial court would hold a large-scale sacrificial ceremony on the day of the spring festival. This year's sacrificial ceremony was of a higher standard than last year's, as it was the first large-scale sacrificial ceremony since the founding of the Great Xia dynasty. Last year, they followed the feudal system, but this year, they followed the aristocratic system. Naturally, it was different. Another difference was that apart from offering sacrifices to the Yellow Emperor and Xiaoyu, they also had to offer sacrifices to the ancestral temple. Just before the new year, after deciding to accept the clan, Ouyang Shuo took advantage of the opportunity to build a temple in Royal City to worship the ancestors of the Ouyang bloodline. Once the ancestral temple was completed, it could be considered as the last link of the dynasty. In the eyes of the commoners, the scene of the sacrificial ceremony was so grand and clamorous, and it was naturally indescribably flourishing. Yet Ouyang Shuo's heart was like still water, and he'd long since become accustomed to it. In the next few days, Ouyang Shuo was busy attending all kinds of banquets. On the second day of the first month, Ouyang Shuo set up a banquet in the summer palace to entertain the officials led by White Birch, Magnolia Moon, Siege Lion, Swan and I, and the Western Minister. Today, they had become a new force that could not be ignored in the officialdom of Great Xia. Ouyang Shuo didn't want to drift apart because of the passage of time or the obstruction of space. Especially these governors, they were related to the empire, and Ouyang Shuo had no choice but to attach importance to them. On the third day of the first month, Ouyang Shuo hosted a banquet at the Imperial Guards camp. Bai Qi, Han Xen, Sun Bin, Hu Xiubing, Li Mu, Shi Wansui, and the other commanders were all present. This was also an opportunity for the generals to get to know each other, especially Li Mu and the other generals who had just joined the army. They could take this opportunity to get to know each other. At the end of the holiday, Ouyang Shuo had to discuss the specific battle plan of attacking Annan with the generals. On the fourth day of the first lunar month, Ouyang Shuo held a banquet in the hall of Southwest University, China, to entertain the professors and representatives of the outstanding students from the three schools. That night, Ouyang Shuo was still in the Four Quarters Embassy, entertaining the envoys from the various empires stationed in Shanghai City. On the 23rd day of the second month in the 5th year of the Gaia year, the imperial court's break ended and the court officially began. The first day was the court assembly. The symbolic meaning of the royal court meeting was far greater than its actual meaning. As the cabinet's prime minister, Jiang Shang represented the civil officials to give a speech. He reviewed the achievements of the previous year and announced Gaia's 5-year plan and annual budget. The commander of the Dragon Stallion Army, the dynasty's only general, Bai Qi, spoke on behalf of the military. He expressed his stance on the border defense, and at the same time, briefly explained Gaia's 5-year battle plan. All in all, this was a very harmonious court meeting. There was no argument. With the end of the Grand Court meeting, Great Xia, the machine that had been dormant for a short period of time, started to rumble and run again. Summer Palace, Imperial Study. Ouyang Shuo received Yunnan's Governor-General Bai Hua alone. Sit. The two of them were old friends and could be considered half-confidants, so they were relatively casual. When Ouyang Shuo met Bai Hua, it was not because he wanted to meddle in Yunnan's political affairs. Naturally, the cabinet would take care of that. The meeting this time was mainly to coordinate the cooperation between the military and the government. To put it bluntly, it was to prepare for the Battle of Annan. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions and fodder move first. Annam's territory was not large, but it had 8 million players, which was a tough nut to crack. In order to win this fierce battle, the Black Serpent Guard had carried out intensive reconnaissance and infiltration of Annam as early as the first half of Gaia's 4th year. In the second half of the year, the Military Intelligence Department also became involved. The Grand Council now had detailed information on all parts of Annam, from the situation of the garrisons in coastal defense city to the topography, products, rivers, and so on. In every corner of Annam, they were constantly gathered in the Grand Council and handed over to the staff for reference. In front of Great Xia, Annam had no secrets to speak of. Regarding all this, Ruan Tianke, the lord of coastal defense city of Annam, only had a guess and a hunch, but he knew nothing about the actual situation. In terms of reconnaissance, Great Xia was far ahead of Annam. They were not on the same level at all. For this reason, Great Xia invested as much as 4 to 5 million gold coins in the 3 major intelligence departments every year. In addition to intelligence reconnaissance, the preparation of war materials had also begun before winter last year. As one of the provinces bordering Annam, Yunnan province became a key province for war preparations. There is one thing I don't understand. The border between Mengding County of Yunnan province and Annam is a rolling rocky mountain range. It is difficult for birds to cross. How are we going to send supplies to the battlefield? Bai Hua asked. Logically, because it was not the month of national war, if Great Xia wanted to attack Annam, they could only do so through waterways, including the allocation of war materials. In this case, coastal provinces such as Lingnan Province and Minnan Province should be responsible for the preparation of war materials. Bai Hua was puzzled, but the order from the Privy Council was very clear, which was to let Yunnan Province make early preparations. Ouyang Shua smiled slightly. This time I called you here to answer your questions. With that, Ouyang Shua handed over a black iron seal, only half the size of a fist. What is this? Bai Hua took a look and checked the attributes. Mountain opening seal. After use, it can open a tunnel in any mountain in the territory. This seal was a special item dropped by a lord of Star Nation when they attacked the Star Nation. It had been kept by Ouyang Shua to this day. At that time, Ouyang Shua had thought about using this seal in the Annam battlefield. Since Bai Hua thought that Great Xia's materials could not be transported into Annam, Wan Tian Kane naturally did not think that Great Xia could open a secret tunnel in the Rocky Mountains, leading directly to the hinterland of Annam. Now you should understand why the Privy Council asked Yunnan Province to make early preparations, right? Why didn't you say so earlier? Bai Hua shook his head. With his secret weapon, Bai Hua felt sad for the Annam players. Of course, a seal alone could not win the war. In the end, they still had to fight with real swords and guns. It was just that with his passage on land, the odds of winning the war were higher. I understand. After going back, I will speed up the preparation of war materials. Bai Hua agreed and carefully put the mountain opening seal into his storage bag. Commander Bai Chi will contact you for the specific location. The tunnel was naturally not only used to transport war materials, but also a secret military passage. The location of the tunnel would be decided by Bai Chi, the war expert. Got it. The conversation between the two came to an end. February 25th, Martial Heroic Hall. Ouyang Shua summoned the generals to discuss the attack on Annam. This war involved almost the entire Great Xia army. Which unit would be the vanguard, which unit would be the main force, and which unit would be responsible for guarding the domestic borders had to be discussed properly. After the beginning of spring, the war would begin. Great Xia was vast, and in order to mobilize troops on a large scale, orders had to be given in advance. Such a large-scale mobilization of troops was not something that could be done in a week or two. At the same time, in order to numb the enemy as much as possible, the mobilization of the troops had to be kept secret. There were all kinds of complicated matters. Fortunately, with the Grand Council taking the lead, Ouyang Shua temporarily transferred 2 top strategists, Jia Su and Peng Tong, to the War Department to assist Zhao Kuo in formulating a strict military plan. As the emperor, Ouyang Shua had to oversee the capital and might not be able to rush to the front lines. Therefore, before discussing all the issues, it was necessary to decide on the commander and deputy commander of this expeditionary force. A snake couldn't be without a head, let alone a large-scale military campaign. Among the armies, apart from the Imperial Guards and City Guards, the Dragon Stallion Army had the lightest defense task. Moreover, the secret tunnel between Yunnan Province and Annam was about to be opened. The Dragon Stallion Army was the main force in the Annam War. The commander of the Dragon Stallion Army, Bai Chi, was naturally the best candidate for commander. In fact, last year, when the various armies were reorganizing their defensive areas, Ouyang Shua had a secret discussion with Bai Chi. According to Ouyang Shua's plan, The Dragon Stallion army would use the opportunity of the Annam War to leap out of the domestic circle in one fell swoop. In the future, they would mainly conquer the ASEAN region, becoming the strongest sword in Great Xia's expansion. Upon hearing this, Bai Qi had no objections. Thus, at the end of last year, even though the Dragon Stallion army didn't have any defensive tasks, Bai Qi had taken advantage of the winter break to increase the intensity of the training of the officers and soldiers, ensuring that the entire army's combat strength was at its peak. This year's martial scholar had come from the Dragon Stallion army. Bai Qi, hear my order. Ouyang Shua's expression was solemn. This general is here. Bai Qi stepped out of the ranks, still expressionless and cool. I appoint you as the commander of the expeditionary force in the Annam War. You will be in charge of both the land and sea armies, and you will be in charge of all the generals. Outside of the war, I bestow upon you the authority to act as you see fit. As he spoke, Ouyang Shua personally handed over the certificate of appointment and commander's seal. Upon hearing these words, Bai Qi's expression finally changed a little. With a whoosh, he knelt on one knee and respectfully received the certificate of appointment and commander's seal with both hands. When Han Xin and the other commanders saw this, they couldn't help but feel envious. Annam had 800,000 Imperial Guards, 300,000 territorial soldiers, and 1.5 million combat professional players. In order to capture Annam, the Great Xia would have to send at least 1 million soldiers. There was no doubt that this was the largest battle in the wilderness to date. Even the military maps didn't have such a scale. The Great Xia's expedition force was estimated to include the Imperial Guards, City Guards, Dragon Stallion Army, and Flying Bear Army. The Navy would include the Royal Fleet, the Cliff Mountain Fleet, and the Pacific Fleet. Not a single one of them wasn't an elite among elites, an ace among aces. To the Great Xia generals, to be able to lead such an army and command such an epic battle was worth dying with no regrets. As soon as the news of the attack on Annam spread, the army's requests for battle rang out incessantly. Among the commanders, the commander of the Imperial Guards, Hui Xiubing, was the closest to the king, but everyone knew that Hui Xiubing was a divine general who specialized in individual combat and wasn't as adept at commanding such a large-scale battle. Therefore, Han Xin and the others didn't want to be the commander. If the king had appointed someone else as the commander, there would probably be people who wouldn't be convinced. However, the king had chosen the killing god Bai Qi, and even the arrogant Han Xin was convinced. In addition to his illustrious reputation in history, Bai Qi was worthy of being the top meritorious general throughout the Great Xia's journey. He was also extraordinary and invincible. No one in the army was dissatisfied. The people of Great Xia had long regarded Bai Qi as the god of war. Chapter 1007. In addition to Bai Qi, Ouyang Shua appointed Shi Wansui, the commander of the city guards, and Zhou Yu, the admiral of the Royal Navy, as his deputies to assist Bai Qi in commanding the land and water armies. Hui Xiubing, the commander of the Imperial Guards, still served as the vanguard. After the entire framework was settled, it was time to discuss which troops to deploy. The 5 legions of the Dragon Stallion Army, 4 legions of the Imperial Guards, and 2 legions of the Flying Bear Army could all be deployed. Except for the 4th Legion of the City Guards to guard Beihai City. The other 4 legions could also be deployed. All in all, there were 15 legions, a total of 1.05 million soldiers. The remaining 3 full army groups, the Brave Tiger Army, the Leopard Army, and the Soaring Eagle Army, had to guard the long northern border of the dynasty or deal with internal wars, so it was not suitable to be deployed for the time being. If they were to be deployed, it would be when the situation in the Annan region was unfavorable. On the Navy side, the Royal Navy and the Cliff Mountain Fleet were dispatched, while the Pacific Fleet only dispatched 1 formation to participate in the war because the Taiping warships had other important tasks. In addition to capturing the Hawaiian Islands, the Taiping Fleet also had to deter and guard against 2 enemies, one in the south and one in the north. Needless to say, the one in the north was the Yan-Huang Alliance. Ouyang Shua did not dare to guarantee that Di Chun and the others would not take advantage of the time when Great Xia was fighting in the Annan region to attack Great Xia. Those aristocratic children put their interests above everything else and had done many evil things. Therefore, during the war, the Pacific Fleet had to ensure that the waters around Great Xia were under their absolute control and not give the Yanhuang alliance a chance to cause trouble. The enemy in the south was the Luzon Kingdom. Ever since the Luzon Kingdom's fleet was beaten up by the Cliff Mountain Fleet, they had been quiet. Even so, Ouyang Shua did not dare to take it lightly. Only a dog that did not bark would bite. The Luzon Kingdom was the backbone of the pro-war faction in ASEAN. Without the deterrence of the sea, it was hard to say what they would do. In addition to fighting at sea and landing operations, the three participating fleets also shouldered the important tasks of transporting the army and guarding the merchant ships transporting supplies. In order to ensure that millions of troops and massive supplies could be transported to the front lines smoothly, Great Xia had secretly deployed more than 800 large merchant ships to be on standby at any time to ensure the smooth sea supply line. In addition, the Indian Ocean Fleet, commanded by Yanhua, shouldered the heavy responsibility of deterring the other ASEAN countries, especially Java and Chenla. In short, for the war in Annan, Great Xia had mobilized almost the entire army. The next step was to discuss the specifics of tactics. On this point, Bai Qi, Jia Su, and the other military strategists had the right to speak. Ouyang Shua only listened and did not intervene. The entire military conference lasted for 5 days. After the dust settled, Great Xia's war machine began to operate quietly. Under the unified deployment of the Grand Council, all the participating troops began to assemble at the predetermined location. Massive amounts of war materials were also being prepared at an accelerated pace. In the blink of an eye, it was March of the 5th year of Gaia. The midwinter that had plagued the city for several months was gradually melting from the south to the north. This was especially true for cities in the southwest, like Shanghai City. Under the influence of the subtropical ocean monsoon, one could already faintly smell the scent of spring. The ice and snow melted, and the earth recovered. The desolate wilderness was reborn, dotted with green. After the Lantern Festival, it was the start of a new school. Ever since Bing'er became the princess of the empire last year, her national studies had become heavier and heavier. As time went by, the national studies in the afternoon clashed with the virtual classes in the morning. The best solution was to dispense with the virtual classes and change the modern lessons to be taught by professional teachers in the palace. With the status of Great Xia, it was a simple matter to find a few junior high school teachers. Ouyang Shua did not do so. The reason was simple. In the virtual classes, Bing'er had classmates to study and play with. Once the lessons were moved to the palace, she would really be alone. Things finally turned for the better when the family members were accepted at the end of the year. According to preliminary statistics, there were 56 members of the imperial family who were still in school. From primary school to university, there were students of all levels. Ouyang Shua simply decided to choose a palace outside the Xia Palace and split it into a directorate for the children of the imperial family to attend school. All the expenses would be borne by the royal family. The directorate would combine the modern curriculum and national studies together. It would be rationally distributed and taught in accordance with the aptitude of the students. Apart from that, Ouyang Shua would also, depending on the situation, equip each student with the most suitable internal energy secret manual to lay the foundation for their martial arts cultivation. In the future, the imperial family of Great Xia would not only need civil officials, but also military generals. As the only eldest princess of Great Xia, Bing'er would also be studying in the directorate. During the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties, the directorate was the highest educational institution and administrative organization set up by the imperial court. It was also known as the Imperial College or National Studies. Because Great Xia already had institutions of higher learning like the Southwest University China Hall, the directorate was not a permanent institution of the imperial court. This time, Ouyang Shua used the directorate as a palace school, which was different from the historical position. As soon as the news came out, the members of the imperial family had no reason to refuse. They were eager to take this opportunity to get closer to the royal family. Those who did not have children in school were even more envious. Even if they did not try to curry favor with the royal family, the teachers invited by the directorate would definitely be the best in the world. If their children could study in the directorate, they would already be separated from the children of ordinary families. Not to mention the coveted secret manuals. Since the king had made such a promise, the secret manuals would at least be at the gold level or even the king level. Since it was related to the eldest princess of Shui Yu's education, the Department of Science, Education, Culture, and Public Security was extremely efficient. In less than a month, the directorate was completely renovated and all the teachers were hired. On the 1st of March, the directorate officially opened. This was a major event for the imperial family. Ouyang Shuo deliberately pushed away all the government affairs and specially came to the directorate to preside over the opening ceremony and the opening ceremony. The members of the imperial family who had children in school were also invited to attend the ceremony. The scene was extremely lively. As the king, Ouyang Shuo was also the elder of the students in the directorate. He gave a passionate speech, which was nothing more than encouraging the students to respect their teachers, study diligently, respect, and love each other, and so on. Although it was a cliché, it was the truth. Today, Binger was wearing a blue robe that was provided by the directorate. She looked very delicate and pretty. The little girl sat upright in front of her and listened to her brother's speech carefully. Perhaps at this moment, the little girl suddenly understood what the royal family's responsibility was. As the eldest princess of the empire, although her status was extraordinary, she also needed to set an example in front of her cousins. The directorate was not a place for the children of the imperial family to play around. On the contrary, the rules here were stricter than in the virtual classroom, and the homework was also more arduous. As the saying goes, a jade that is not cut is worthless. Even if one was born into a noble family, without hard work, how could one become a true talent? Every dynasty placed great importance on the prince's homework. Take the Qin dynasty as an example. Every day, the princes would go to the study room at 4 in the morning to attend school, and they would only leave school at 4 in the afternoon. The schedule was even stricter than that of modern schools. Every day, there would be 2 meals, breakfast at 7:30 and lunch at 12. If any prince didn't finish his homework at this time, it would only delay everyone's meal time. Only when the teacher thought that he had finished his task could he go eat. The holidays of the princes were even more pitiful. From the age of 6, they entered the study room. Every year, they only had 1 day of vacation, 1 day of the Dragon Boat Festival, 1 day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, 1 day of their own birthday, and 2 days of their father's birthday. Apart from New Year's Eve, they had no other holidays. Modern students not only had holidays, but they also had winter and summer vacations and weekends. Needless to say, they were very happy. Under such a strict teaching system, a considerable number of top students emerged among the princes. When Emperor Kangxi was still a prince, he was very studious. He had studied astronomy, mathematics, geography, and Latin from missionaries like Nan Huairan. His achievements in mathematics were very profound. In today's mathematical equations, the Chinese translations of the elements, sub-elements, and roots were said to have been created by Kangxi. Perhaps because they had inherited Kangxi's high intelligence. Almost all of the princes of Kangxi could be called the pillars of the country. Unfortunately, only one emperor could be the emperor, and those who failed in the competition would often become prisoners. But even so, their talents couldn't be erased. Not to mention the ancient royal family. Even in modern society, the children of bureaucrats or rich families didn't have it easy compared to the children of ordinary families when it came to education. In fact, it was even more difficult. Like Di Chan and the others, although they had been suppressed by Ouyang Shuo, who was a commoner, to the point that they almost couldn't breathe, they were by no means foppish. Otherwise, how could they be in charge of such a large territory at such a young age? Therefore, if they wanted the Ouyang family to truly continue or even develop into an aristocratic family, They had to start from the next generation, starting from education. Regarding this point, the elders in the family were very supportive. In the words of Ouyang Shua's second grandfather, Uncle Ouyang, our generation suddenly became rich, but we are all good-for-nothings. If we want to continue the family's legacy, we have to rely on the next generation. When the uncles heard this, they couldn't help but smile bitterly. That's too sarcastic. Although the second grandfather's words were a little extreme, they could be considered to be to the point. Of course, whether the Ouyang family could completely take root on Hope Planet and reproduce, apart from the pioneer Ouyang Shua, mainly depended on Bing, and Ouyang Shua's two unborn children. The three of them were the real direct descendants, the children of the royal family. Although he hadn't told anyone, in Ouyang Shua's eyes, there was no difference between a man and a woman. He even thought that if Bing was outstanding enough, it wouldn't be impossible to push her to the position of empress in the future. After Ouyang Shua finished his speech, Bing as the student representative, also went up to the podium to speak. Looking at the graceful and elegant girl on the podium, who didn't have the slightest bit of stage fright and spoke confidently and elegantly, Ouyang Shua's eyes were full of affection. It was love and also gratification. The crowd of boys and girls below the podium revealed even more infatuated looks, completely subdued by Bing. This moment was worth remembering. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 1008. The Red River originated from the Dragon Tiger Mountain in Dali, Yunnan Province. Because of the red shale formation in the basin, the water was bright red, which was very special. It had the same beauty as the famous Jinsha River. Like a winding red dragon, it flowed through 17 counties in Yunnan Province and finally converged into the Annan Yuechi Pool, crossed the famous Red River Delta, and finally converged into the Bibu Bay and entered the South China Sea. Hanoi, the capital of the Annan District, was located in the northwest of the Red River Delta, located on the right bank of the Red River. The rolling Red River flowed slowly from the side of the city, and the whole city was surrounded by the Red River embankment. That was where the name Hanoi came from. This was an ancient city with a history of thousands of years. It had been the political, economic, and cultural center of Annan since the 11th century AD. It was rich in historical relics and was full of scenic spots and historic sites. It enjoyed the reputation of the land of millennium relics. It had to be said that this city had a lot of ties with China, and it was an old land of China. In 111 BC, Emperor Wu of Han established Jiaozhi County, and Hanoi was within its scope. In the northern and southern dynasties, Song established Songping County in the Hanoi area, which governed Changhua County. In the Sui dynasty, it was changed to Songping County and became the administrative center of Jiaozhi County. Hanoi was founded in 621 AD as Songping County under the jurisdiction of the Annan Protectorate in the Tang Dynasty. It was the political, economic, and cultural center of northern Annan at that time. It was nicknamed Purple City and later changed to Luocheng and Daoyucheng. In the late Tang Dynasty, Hanoi became the military governor of the Qinghai Army. Why was Hanoi so high in Annan? The terrain of Annan was long and narrow, a bit like a capital S. There were many mountains in the territory, and the mountain range was long. With Haiyun Mountain as the boundary, it was divided into the south and the north. The climate of the two places was very different. Whether from the south to the north or from inland to the coast, Hanoi was the only place to pass. Its geographical location was very important, and it had the largest river port in the north. Therefore, Hanoi could become the center of Annan. Hanoi in the game was also a magnificent city. Because of the influence of China's culture, it was also divided into the inner city and outer city. The inner city was divided into three parts: the Forbidden City, the Imperial City, and the Capital City. The place where the king, his concubines, their descendants, and their attendants lived was called the Forbidden City. Surrounding the Forbidden City was the Imperial City, where the officials' offices were located. The streets, markets, and residential areas outside the Imperial City were the capital. The imperial city's imperial gardens had beautiful scenery. The forbidden city's pavilions were resplendent. The capital city's pagodas were tall, and there were many temples. The architectural style was influenced by the Tang dynasty's culture and had a classical beauty. Moreover, Hanoi was located in the subtropics. Due to its proximity to the Bibu Gulf, the climate was pleasant. It was like spring all year round, with abundant rainfall, lush vegetation, and hundreds of flowers in full bloom. Hanoi was known as the Spring City of 100 Flowers. There were a few wide and straight streets in the city, with Hon Kim Lake as the center. They radiated out in all directions, and tall evergreen trees grew on both sides of the streets. The names of the streets in the capital were very interesting. They were named after trades such as leather shop, copper shop, cotton shop, sugar shop, hemp shop, peach shop, sail shop, etc. Leather Shop Street specialized in selling leather goods, while Copper Shop Street specialized in selling bronze wares. Every street was basically controlled by the big Chamber of Commerce. Leather Shop, Tongchun Shop. The entire leather shop was the property of the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce. Tongchun Shop was the Chamber of Commerce's headquarters. The Chamber of Commerce's boss was surnamed Chun. He was born in a famous merchant family in Hanoi. Not only did he deal in leather goods, but he was also involved in copper, cotton, sugar, and other industries. 2 months ago, the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce welcomed a mysterious merchant who said that he had a way to help the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce transport goods to the Great Xia dynasty for sale and make a high profit. This person kept his word. On the eve of the Spring Festival, the first batch of goods successfully arrived at Beihai Port, making Boss Chun a big profit. Businessmen were born to pursue profits. Das Kapital once said, "If there is a 50% profit, capital dares to take risks. For 100% profit, capital dares to trample all human laws. For a 300% profit, capital dares to commit any crime, even at the risk of being hanged." In view of the tense relationship between Annan and Great Xia, the lord of Haiphong City, Ruan Tianke, had long said that any chamber of commerce was prohibited from carrying out maritime trade with Great Xia, and violators would be severely punished. This ban not only applied to the Chamber of Commerce within Haiphong City, but also applied to the Chamber of Commerce in Royal City. As the only remaining lord of the Annan district in the wilderness, Ruan Tiang's words still carried a lot of weight. In recent years, there had been no trade and commerce between Annan and Great Xia. Precisely because of this, once trade was carried out in secret, the profits would be surprisingly high, comparable to smuggling. It wasn't that the Chamber of Commerce in Hanoi hadn't thought of secretly carrying out trade with Great Xia, but the entire Bibu Bay was under the inspection of the Great Xia Navy. Without the help of an expert, their merchant ships simply couldn't get close to Beihai Port. Having tasted the sweetness, Boss Chin didn't care what kind of extraordinary means this newly acquainted merchant had in Great Xia. He directly addressed him as a brother. As soon as the Lantern Festival ended, he prepared a batch of goods for the second transaction. This time, the goods were loaded onto 5 merchant ships and went all the way south along the Red River. Looking at the caravan going down the river, Boss Chin couldn't hide his greedy expression, and a trace of fanaticism flashed in his eyes. According to the current situation, if this secret trade route was maintained, the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce would rise rapidly. It wouldn't be impossible for it to become the largest chamber of commerce in Hanoi. Just as Boss Chin was thinking about making a fortune again, an unforeseen event suddenly happened. For some unknown reason, and no one knew who leaked the news, but when the originally extremely secretive caravan passed through Haiphong City, it was suddenly stopped. The Judicial Yamen of Haiphong City investigated and sent people to investigate. The truth of the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce being suspected of violating the territorial ban and privately trading with Great Xia was immediately revealed. When Ruan Tianke got the news, he was so angry that smoke was coming out of his nose. Not only did he seize the 5 ships of goods, but he also arrested all the people involved and brought them to justice. He wanted to try these people according to the laws of Haiphong City. If nothing unexpected happened, they would probably be sentenced to death directly. The leader of the caravan was Boss Chin's second son, who was extremely shrewd and capable. When he got the news, Boss Chun was so scared that his face turned pale. He pleaded with his connections everywhere, hoping that Ruan Tianke would be lenient. However, Ruan Tianke was determined to kill the chicken to warn the monkey, and he didn't care about any feelings at all. The Great Xia dynasty was the biggest taboo in Ruan Tianke's heart, and it was an existence that gave him nightmares from time to time. Whoever dared to touch this taboo, Ruan Tianke would kill them. Even the Anan royal family was in cahoots with Ruan Tianke. Not only did they turn a blind eye to Boss Chin's bitter pleas, but they also used this as a reason to list the Chun family as guilty of treason and wanted to confiscate the Tangshan Chamber of Commerce. This time, Boss Chin was really in a desperate situation. At this moment, the mysterious merchant appeared again and found Boss Chun. "You still have the cheek to come. Tell me, did you leak the news to Haifeng City? You're pushing me into the fire pit." As soon as Boss Chun saw this person, he immediately became furious and had a ferocious look on his face. He had long forgotten that just before the caravan set off, the two of them still called each other brothers. The mysterious merchant was very calm. "Why would I leak the secret? What good would it do me? Besides, if I were the one who leaked the secret, would I be stupid enough to come see you again?" This, Boss Chin's expression froze. "This matter is extremely secretive. If it wasn't you, who else could it be? I think there should be a mole." "A mole?" A cold light flashed in Boss Chin's eyes. The mysterious merchant explained, "Only the people of the Tangshan Chamber of Commerce know about this business. It's hard to guarantee that there are no spies from other chambers of commerce. When your enemies see that you are about to make a fortune, how can they not torture you to death?" I was too careless. Boss Chin closed his eyes in pain and was ready to accept his fate. Since ancient times, businessmen did not fight with officials. This time, he had fallen into the hands of Haifeng City and the royal family at the same time. He was really powerless. The mysterious merchant smiled slightly. "It's not that there is no turning point. Brother, do you have a good plan?" When Boss Chin heard this, he immediately became spirited. His fat body nimbly jumped up from the chair. "As long as you help me get through this difficulty, I will reward you handsomely." As long as he could escape this disaster, he would even call Boss Chin father. The mysterious merchant asked, "Who are you doing business with?" "Great Xia," Boss Chin blurted out. After being stunned for a moment, Boss Chin came back to his senses. His expression instantly became very depressed and dispirited. "Don't tell me you wanted to ask Great Xia for help? Why would they care about me?" In Boss Chin's eyes, Great Xia was a colossus with tens of thousands of businessmen coming and going. Why would they negotiate with Annan Province just for a smuggler? "How would you know if you don't try?" The mysterious merchant tried to tempt him and said with a smile, "It just so happens that I know a senior official in the Great Xia Commerce Department. As long as you write a letter asking for help and explain the reason, I can help you submit it." Great Xia has always attached great importance to free trade and the protection of the Chamber of Commerce. I think they will not ignore your life and death. Boss Chun had been forced into a desperate situation. At this time, he could only make a desperate attempt. He gritted his teeth and wrote a sincere letter asking for help according to the mysterious merchant's instructions. After handing the letter to the mysterious merchant, Boss Chun said earnestly, "Please, as long as you can solve this crisis, you will be my biological father and the great benefactor of the Tangshan Chamber of Commerce in the future." The mysterious merchant laughed in his heart. In just a short conversation, this person's address changed several times in a row. He really had the face of a merchant. On the surface, the mysterious merchant remained calm and collected. He put away the letter and said with a smile, "You can rest assured that I will immediately rush to Shanghai City. Wait for my good news. Please." For the next week, Boss Chun was anxious. On the 15th of March, things finally turned for the better. Relying on Boss Chin's letter for help, the Chamberlain of Great Xia sent a negotiation letter to the royal family of Annan Province and Haipang City through formal diplomatic channels. hoping that Annan Province would respect the right of the Chamber of Commerce to free trade and handle the case in accordance with international trade rules. According to the statement of the Chamberlain of Great Xia, it was just a fine. When the royal family of Annan received the negotiation letter from Great Xia, they were hesitant. They left behind a special envoy from the Chamberlain of Great Xia and stated that they would give a reply to Great Xia after serious discussions. What about Ruan Tianke? He was so angry that he tore the negotiation letter into pieces. Insult. This is a blatant insult. Ruan Tianke yelled angrily. If he really agreed to the request of Great Xia, Ruan Tianke's prestige in Annan Province would be ruined. If he did not agree, he was afraid that he would immediately face the next move of Great Xia. Ruan Tianke was in a dilemma. Chapter 1009. Sir, we can't agree to Great Xia's request, Lily said resolutely. What if Great Xia uses this as an excuse to go to war with us? Lily took a deep breath. His eyes were firm, and his words were sonorous. Sir, this war has long been inevitable. Since Great Xia wants to fight, then let's fight. Well said. Ruan Tiange's words were straightforward, but there was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. Although war was inevitable, if Annan fell into the flames of war because of his refusal, would the domestic adventurers still support coastal defense unconditionally? I'm afraid some people will feel resentment. Ruan Tianke smiled bitterly. After making up his mind, Ruan Tianke immediately met with the envoy of Great Xia and refused Great Xia's request for negotiation on the grounds that this matter is the internal affairs of coastal defense, and Great Xia has no right to interfere. The hesitation of the Annan royal family and Ruan Tiange's straightforward refusal were undoubtedly a bad sign. Great Xia received the news and then issued a more strongly worded negotiation letter, claiming that coastal defense had destroyed the global trade ecology and trampled on the free trade rules of the North Bay. They ordered coastal defense to unconditionally release the forcibly detained caravans within a week. Otherwise, in order to maintain the freedom of maritime trade, Great Xia would not hesitate to fight. As soon as the news came out, the Annan players reacted differently. Some were filled with indignation, thinking that Great Xia's move was a provocation and contempt to Annan, and they requested for a war. There were also those who accused coastal defense, thinking that coastal defense should not drag the entire Annan into the quagmire of war for its own selfish reasons. Not everyone was eager for war, and not everyone wanted to be an enemy of Great Xia. Before Great Xia's intention for war was exposed, many people in the Annan player group still held the illusion of peace, and they did not see it as thoroughly as Ruan Tianke. This was also human nature. For a while, the undercurrents in the Annan region were surging, and the sky was boiling. The diplomatic storm between Great Xia and Annan quickly spread around the world through the media. Handan City, the mayor's residence. Every move of Great Xia affected Di Chen's nerves, and he naturally got the news first. It seems that the old fox is determined to attack Annan. Peerless Elegance smiled and said, How can I allow someone to snore beside my bed? It's already very rare for the old fox to be able to endure until now. It's not surprising that he made a move this time. It's just that his methods were a bit inferior. Di Chen didn't agree. A trick is just a trick. There's no such thing as a trick. An effective trick is a brilliant trick. The old fox played this trick very well. Poochie, Peerless Elegance suddenly smiled, overflowing with charm. What are you laughing at? Di Chen was baffled. Peerless Elegance glanced at Di Chen and said indifferently, Have you noticed that the old fox's style of doing things is becoming more and more like yours? He's very skilled at playing all kinds of tricks. Di Chen was startled, and then let out a long sigh. This is what worries me the most. A ferocious beast that only knows how to charge around is not enough to shake our foundation. But a ferocious beast that stands at the same height as us is very worthy of our vigilance. Peerless Elegance was silent. Di Chen waved his hand as if to dispel the heaviness in the air. He smiled and changed the topic. Annan is a tough bone to chew. Since the old fox has made up his mind, We have to speed up the implementation of our plan. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We can't afford to lose. Don't worry. We've been making all the preparations. That's good. As the saying goes, when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. It's not easy to be a qualified fisherman. Many times, you think you've already won, but in fact, you've just fallen into a trap designed by others and become prey in others' mouths. Dawson Dynasty, Liberty City. Jack received the news and immediately felt a sense of urgency. He muttered to himself, "That person is going to take another city. I can't fall behind too much. Northern Meiyarong can't accommodate so many lords." Japan, Mikasa City. Since the setting of the national war, the lord of Mikasa City, Honda Keisuke, had been paying attention to China. Although he didn't want to admit it, under the lead of Great Xia, the current China region was terrifyingly strong. It was fully deserving of being the strongest war zone in the world. In the national war in June, Japan was bound to be the defensive side. Therefore, from January onwards, the entire Japan region began to actively prepare for the war. If they were to be captured by China, it would undoubtedly be a great shame. As the only lord of Japan, Honda Keisuke wouldn't be able to atone for his crime if he didn't commit suicide. For Japan, this was already a battle with their backs against the wall. Hearing that Great Xia was going to war with Annan, Honda Keisuke was somewhat happy. After all, this would greatly consume Great Xia's strength, which was extremely beneficial to Japan in the national war. Then, he became angry for no reason. "Bastard, you really don't put us Japan in your eyes." It can only be said that the thoughts and brain circuits of the Japanese were really different from ordinary people. This nation was extremely arrogant and extremely self-abased. The two contradictory personalities mixed together and gave birth to a perverted culture. Chenla, Nanjing, Java, Luzon, and other ASEAN countries were also silently paying attention to this diplomatic storm. Java. Wui's understood. It's simply shameless. This matter is a conspiracy of Great Xia from the beginning to the end. But so what? Before the situation was clear, Wui's couldn't do anything. A dark cloud that blotted out the sky had quietly covered the sky above ASEAN. A storm was brewing. In the blink of an eye, another week had passed. In the face of Great Xia's tough words, although many players ran to Haiphong City to petition for Yuan Tianke to release the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce's caravan, Yuan Tianke was unmoved. The situation was out of control for a while, causing Yuan Tianke to be dispirited. Lily had been cheering Yuan Tianke on. "Things have come to this point. We can't retreat. We can only resort to war and turn the resentment and contradictions in the country into a united foreign country." Yuan Tianke deeply agreed. Just like that, when the deadline set by Great Xia arrived, Haiphong City's reply was still rejection. Not only that, Yuan Tianke also directly beheaded the members of the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce, including Boss Chen's second son, in public. Yuan Tiang's move left no room for maneuver. Put yourself in a dead end and survive. If he didn't do this, Yuan Tianke was worried that he would compromise under the pressure of all parties. This time, the envoy sent by Great Xia was very calm. After receiving a clear answer, he politely bade farewell and left. It was so calm that it made people tremble in fear. On April 1st, Great Xia officially declared war on Haiphong City on the grounds of seeking justice for the Tongchun Chamber of Commerce. As soon as the news came out, it was like throwing a boulder into a calm lake. Although everyone could faintly feel the dark clouds of war, they didn't expect Great Xia to be so straightforward. Domineering. It should be so straightforward. The players in the China region were excited. They were happy for two reasons. First, Great Xia's declaration of war on Haiphong City further proved that Great Xia was unwilling to take the initiative to provoke a civil war before the arrival of the national war, which reassured the players in the China region. In the voting for the leaders of the national war, Ouyang Shuo was once again far ahead. Second, once Great Xia took down Annan City, they would once again obtain honor points for the national war, which was undoubtedly a stimulant for the upcoming national war. Shortly after the global auction ended, the Japan region launched a vigorous fundraising campaign to make up for the funding gap of Keisuke Honda's auction of the National War Enhancement Card. Once the news came out, it was naturally known by the citizens. During that period of time, there were plenty of rumors in the country that pointed the spearhead at Ouyang Shua, Dichun, and Feng Xiuhuang who participated in the auction. There were even people who gave them the title of traitors. China had no lack of keyboard warriors who claimed to be patriotic, but if they really wanted to raise funds from them, they would probably hide far away and clamor, "Isn't Great Xia the wealthiest in the world? How dare they collect money from us? How shameless are they?" The ugliness of human nature could be seen clearly. Fortunately, such clowns weren't mainstream, and most of the players in the China region could still deal with them rationally. Great Xia consecutively obtained 30 honor points for the China region, which reduced the number of attacks on Ouyang Shua. Otherwise, it was unknown what kind of mess would have been created. The China players were excited, but the others didn't think so. Annan City, Haiphong City, Ruan Tianke was very calm. As soon as Great Xia declared war, he ordered the recall of the Northern Army. Haiphong City had 300,000 soldiers. Apart from the 20,000 Imperial Guards who guarded the main city, the remaining 4 field legions were stationed in the southern embankment city, and 1 was stationed into Nong City at the border between the north and the south. The remaining 2 legions were stationed in the north, which showed how guarded Ruan Tianke was against Great Xia. At the same time, Ruan Tianke also arranged the only navy he could bring out in the sea around Haiphong City, laying the first defense chain. As a coastal city, Haiphong City was most worried about attacks from the sea. However, Great Xia was known for its strong navy, and Ruan Tianke could only fight with his back to the wall. Some players in the Annan region remained on the sidelines, while others began to prepare for war. After all, Great Xia only wanted to teach Haiphong City a lesson and didn't necessarily want to start a full-scale war with Annan. Therefore, before the situation was clear, there were still some people who held a fluke mentality. The ASEAN countries were even more motionless and silent. As soon as the war order was issued, the Great Xia army, which had long been ready, immediately took action. The first to respond was naturally the Navy. On April 1st, led by the Royal Fleet, the Cliff Mountain Fleet, and the first formation of the Pacific Fleet set sail from Beihai Port, Cliff Mountain Port, Jiaozhou Port, and Xinglong Port. The joint fleet would meet in the Bibu Gulf. For a time, the southwest coast was full of sails, coming and going, and it was very lively. On the morning of April 3rd, the joint fleet assembled. More than 280 main battleships and thousands of auxiliary battleships were like covering the sky, filling the Bibu Gulf. The snow-white sails directly dyed the blue sea white. What was more terrifying was that there were more than 800 large merchant ships behind the joint fleet, responsible for transporting supplies and army soldiers. The scene was shocking to the point of explosion. If one didn't see it with their own eyes, they couldn't understand this sense of oppression. In front of such a fleet, anyone would be torn to pieces. Great Xia had bared its fangs and rushed straight to Annan. The war between the two sides would begin with the naval battle. Chapter 10:10. On the 4th day of the 4th month of the 5th year of Gaia, the Great Xia Navy and the Coastal Defense Navy clashed in the Bibu Gulf. The result of the battle was shocking. 1 hour. The Coastal Defense Navy only lasted for an hour before they were torn to pieces by the Great Xia Alliance fleet. Countless fleet wreckage and tens of thousands of corpses floated helplessly on the surface of the sea, washed by the waves, all the way to the beach of Coastal Defense City, where they were stranded. The densely packed war wreckage on the beach spoke of a certain cruelty. The strength of the Great Xia Navy shocked the entire world once again. When this ferocious tiger revealed its fangs, its terrifying lethality was truly frightening. Fear was like a plague that quickly spread around the world. The ASEAN countries were completely speechless. They no longer dared to have any other thoughts and retracted their heads. Honda Keisuke of Japan had a sleepless night. He tossed and turned, his eyes red. Prepare for war. Prepare for war. Prepare for war at all costs. This is a battle to the death. This was the sentence that Honda Keisuke said the most, and it represented the thoughts of all the Japanese players. The war had not yet begun, but the Japanese were already united and ready to fight to the death. Deichin was also terrified. He couldn't help but ask himself, how long could the newly formed Handan fleet last against the Great Xian Navy? Shaking his head, Deichin didn't dare to think further. Only the Mediterranean countries that had dealt with the Great Xian Navy before could remain calm. Even Jack was hesitant about whether to circle around the Hawaiian Islands and have a head-on battle with the Great Xian Navy. After thinking for a day and a night, Jack finally made up his mind. We have to fight. If they didn't fight now, it would be even more difficult in the future. Jack was very confident in the Freedom Fleet, which was not inferior to the Great Xian Navy. To the Great Xia Alliance Fleet, the Coastal Defense Navy was just a small pebble on the road. After kicking it away, the fleet's momentum did not decrease as it headed straight for the long coastline of Annan. On the wreckage-filled sea battlefield, the three fleets went their separate ways. The Expeditionary Force Deputy General and temporary commander of the Alliance Fleet, Zhou Yu, personally led the Royal Fleet to attack Coastal Defense City. The Navy's Commander-in-Chief, Zhou Tai, led the Pacific Fleet's 1st Formation North, responsible for sweeping the coastal cities north of Coastal Defense City. Yu Daio led the Cliff Mountain Fleet to the south and swept the vast area south of Coastal Defense City. The purpose of the Alliance Fleet was very simple. It was to sweep the coast of Annan ruthlessly, then choose a suitable place to land, establish a stronghold, and create the conditions for the army to land and fight. Before this, Haiphong City was like a tiger without claws, unable to do anything. The Navy's prowess in the Kingdom War had been completely revealed, especially to the coastal kingdoms. If they didn't have a comparable navy, the upcoming Kingdom War would be very difficult to endure. April 5th, Haiphong City. Facing the rising sun, the golden dragon flag fluttered in the wind. The news of the destruction of the Navy had already spread throughout Haiphong City. To the commoners of Haiphong City, the arrival of the Great Xian Navy was tantamount to seeing a group of death gods, and they hurriedly retreated. Not a single fishing boat could be seen within a radius of 1,000 miles. Even the boldest fishermen did not dare to go out to sea when they saw the countless wreckage left on the shore. At the top of the city wall, Ruan Tianke looked at the slowly approaching Great Xian Navy, and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Something's wrong. Why does the Great Xian Navy only have so few warships? Li Li, who was standing next to Ruan Tianke, said, "The enemy should have split up. Look." Ruan Tianke's eyes were full of ridicule. Emperor Xia, Ouyang Shua, is indeed a hypocrite. He said that he is seeking justice for the Tongchun Business Alliance, but in fact, he wants to make us his mortal enemies. The ambition of a wolf is clear as day. Lili added. Behind the two stood more than a dozen adventurer players. Their identities were not simple. They were the leaders of the top 10 guilds in Hanoi, and they specially came to Haiphong City to investigate. Listening to Ruan Tianke and Lili echoing each other, their expressions were quite complicated. Ruan Tianke suddenly turned around, cupped his fists, and said, "Everyone, the facts are already very clear. Great Xia wants to destroy Annan City. Please don't take any chances. What do you want us to do? Brother Juan, please give us a straightforward answer." There was no lack of heroes among the adventurer players. Since the Kingdom War was inevitable, they were not afraid. The 8 million players of Annan City were not afraid of Great Xia. Brother Juan, please tell us. The Falcon Squad is at your disposal. Some people echoed, and of course, some people were silent. Obviously, they had not made up their minds. Seeing this, Ruan Tianke did not mind. He pretended to be relaxed and said, "Since you are so loyal, please follow me to the governor's residence to discuss a plan." That's right. With that, the group left the city wall. Looking at the situation, the Great Xian Navy was not in a hurry to attack the city. Naturally, Ruan Tianke was not in a hurry either. On the way back to the governor's residence, Ruan Tianke quietly pulled Li and said, "Since the Great Xia army is divided, then the two legions stationed into Nong City and Dam City are in danger. I asked the general to immediately order the two legions to defend and wait for reinforcements. I will persuade the mutant troops to go south." Ruan Tianke believed that if the two legions were determined to defend, the two cities could at least defend for a week, which was enough for the mutant troops to go south to reinforce. Of course, reinforcements could only rely on the mutant troops. At present, there were only 160,000 troops in Haifeng City. Regardless of whether the Great Xia army was in a hurry to attack the city, Ruan Tianke would not transfer this army away. It was the stabilizing force of Haifeng City. April 6th, Danang City. Danang City was located in the central part of Annam. It was connected to Hu in the north, Na Trang in the south, Five Elements Mountain at its back, and Camellia Peninsula in the northeast as a barrier. The bay was horseshoe-shaped, wide and deep. Not far from the north of the city was the famous Haiyuan Mountain. The Haiyuan Mountain stretched from the border of Annam to the east, straight into the sea. The Haiyuan Ridge was its last peak, 470 meters above sea level. The mountain was surrounded by white clouds all year round, drifting with the wind. The mountain was lush with vegetation and green bamboos, which blended with the blue sky and blue sea, making people forget to return. This mountain separated the north and the south, with a unique location and a very important strategic position. Because of this, the 3rd Legion of Haifeng City was ordered to be stationed here. Yesterday morning, the Legion commander Fan Tianming received an order from General Li to defend the city and wait for reinforcements. As soon as the military order was issued, Fan Tianming immediately led his troops into the city and began to arrange the city defense. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, Fan Tianming implemented military control over Danang City and temporarily recruited young adults to help the army defend the city. The focus of defense was on the east side of the sea. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, the first formation of the Cliff Mountain Fleet arrived as scheduled. The focus of Great Xia's attack was on Danang City. According to the battle plan drawn up by the Grand Council, as long as Danang City was taken first, the long and narrow Annam could be divided into two parts, so that the two sides could not face each other. Therefore, the Battle of Danang City was the first highlight of the Battle of Annam. Behind the first formation of the Cliff Mountain Fleet were two army legions. One was the 2nd Imperial Guard Legion, led by Hua Tsubing, and the other was the 2nd City Guard Legion, led by Mu Guing. The two legions would cooperate with the Cliff Mountain Fleet to take Danang City in one fell swoop. Ruan Tianke thought that they could hold the city for a week, but he underestimated Great Xia's strategic determination. Bai Qi gave Yu Dayo a death order that if they could not take Danang City in 2 days, he would bring his head to see him. Yu Dayo received the order and could only howl to pass the pressure down. He shouted to the commander and the battalion commanders, "Listen up, all of you. If you can't take Danang City in 1.5 days, I will twist your heads off." As soon as the battalion commanders returned to the flagship, they hurriedly summoned the sentinel and the captains and said in a gloomy voice, "The admiral said that if we can't take Danang City in 1.5 days, he will twist my head off. I cherish my life very much. Before I am decapitated by the admiral, I will definitely chop off your heads first so that you will not be lonely on the road to hell." The captains returned to their respective battleships with pale faces, gathered all the officers and soldiers, and announced loudly, "If we can't take Danang City in half a day, we will commit suicide together. There is no other way out." The soldiers at the bottom level blinked their eyes when they heard this. With their simple minds, they could not understand what was the connection between not taking Danang City and committing suicide together. Was this a new trend? The soldiers were very puzzled. When the captain next to them saw this, he came up and slapped them on the head and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Pick up your weapons and get ready to kill the enemy. We are going to die anyway." The soldiers felt that what the captain said was very reasonable, so they really stopped thinking about it. Who cares? We will just follow the captain and charge forward. Just like Haifeng City, Da Nang City was also a coastal city, and its only weakness was that it was near the sea. After the fleet was in position, Yu Dayo, who personally went to the front line to command, did not hesitate and directly ordered the fleet to enter the port to carry out the first round of bombardment. Military orders were like mountains, and Yu Dayo could not have the slightest bit of mercy. Boom, boom, boom. For a moment, the merchant ships at the port were hit by the cannons and were blown into pieces. Wood chips flew everywhere like sharp blades, and before they could even cause a splash in the port was in a complete mess. In order to choose a suitable landing point for the Marine Corps, under Yu Dayo's command, the dense cannons directly razed the entire port to the ground. In an instant, the port was turned into a sea of fire. Thick smoke rose up and was blown by the sea breeze to the top of the city, making the soldiers guarding the city cry. Compared to this, the soldiers were more afraid of the enemy's iron and blood methods. There was no meaningless shouting, and the moment they arrived, they launched a fierce attack. There was no mercy, and all they could see was the enemy. The buildings were turned into pieces, and there was no one left. Facing such an iron and blood army, the city guards were afraid even before the battle began. Seeing this, a trace of worry flashed in Fan Tieming's eyes. The general's order was to defend for a week, and if the city was breached, he could only apologize with his life. When the fire was extinguished, the entire port had become a piece of scorched earth. The air was filled with a strong, burnt smell, and there was a faint smell of barbecue. Thinking of the people struggling and screaming in the sea of fire, some of the city guards could not help but vomit on the spot, and their faces turned pale. The young men who were temporarily recruited even vomited, and their legs were weak. They no longer had any strength to fight. Chapter 10:11. On the flagship, Gaihai, Yu Dayo saw the sorry state of the defenders through a telescope. He grinned and said, "A bunch of inexperienced girls. They can't take it anymore. Everyone, bombard Da Nang City." Yu Dayo turned around and ordered. The east wall of Da Nang City was only 400 meters away from the dock, still within the firing range of the fleet's cannons. There was nothing more to say. Boom, boom, boom. The steel cannonballs drew beautiful arcs in the air, like iron fists, and smashed on the black brick wall, sending up pieces of rubble. Stone chips flew past the ears of the defenders on the city wall like a hail of bullets. In less than half an hour, the seemingly indestructible wall had cracks everywhere like a spider web. Some parts had even sunk in and were about to collapse. Aim at the sunk parts and focus fire on one part of the wall, Yu Dayo ordered. Suddenly, the concentrated artillery fire was like meteorites falling from the sky, leaving behind sparks as it carried out a continuous attack on the city wall. The top and bottom of the city wall shook, as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. Creak! The flag on the tower was hit by a cannonball and broke into two pieces. On top of the wall, the 3rd Legion of Coastal Defense City was ready. Fan Tianming, the Legion commander, frowned and looked serious. He comforted the soldiers and gave the order to counterattack. Of course, the technology of cannons was not unique to Xia. Coastal Defense City also had the technology, but their industrial system was not as developed as Xia's, so they could not mass-produce them. There were 30 cannons on the wall of Da Nang City. They also fired at the enemy ships docked at the port, creating huge waves. Boom, boom, boom. Although the number of cannons in Da Nang City was not comparable to that of the Cliff Mountain Fleet, it still caused a lot of trouble for the Cliff Mountain Fleet. In the blink of an eye, 3 battleships were destroyed and slowly sank into the water. Countless people were hit by the cannonballs. The port was too small. The 40 battleships of the Cliff Mountain Fleet were densely packed. As long as the cannoneers were not fools, they could easily hit their targets. Yu Dayo gave the order, so no one dared to retreat. Facing the cannoneers on the wall, the battleships fought back one after another. Even if some battleships were disabled, as long as they were not sunk, they continued to bombard the wall. The ferocity of the enemy made the guards of Coastal Defense City tremble in fear. This is simply a group of desperados. Seeing that the city walls were about to fall, Fan Tianming helplessly began to arrange for the troops to retreat from the city walls, preparing to fight the enemy in the city to the death. He did not believe that the enemy fleet would be able to win against the Third Army in street battles after going ashore. Crash! At this moment, a loud sound came from the southern side of the city wall. Under the continuous bombardment of the cannons, a large hole was finally blasted in a section of the city wall, which then collapsed. For a moment, smoke and dust billowed. The soldiers standing on that section of the city wall screamed and fell from the top of the city wall. They were buried under the bricks and stones, obviously dead. Just like that, Danang City had fallen. Retreat. Fan Tianming no longer hesitated and led his troops away from the city wall. Finally, the city wall collapsed. Yu Daio's face revealed an expression of relief. His head was saved. Next, it was time for the land army to take the stage. As the Marine Corps of the Cliff Mountain Fleet set up a stronghold at the dock, merchant ships carrying the 2nd Imperial Guard Corps and the 2nd City Guard Corps entered the port one by one and quickly landed and assembled. Since Danang City was the focus of the attack, how could Bai Qi not arrange for the land army to follow? The moment the city wall collapsed, the fate of Danang City and the Third Army of Haifeng City was already decided. What followed was just a fearless struggle, but ultimately, they could not control their own fates. Charge! Huitzubing led his cavalry along the path that was blasted open. Amidst the smoke and fire, he was the first to charge into the city. Even if it was a street battle in the city, the Imperial Guards were fearless. With their superb horsemanship, they would only set off a more monstrous massacre. Kill! Mu Guing led her troops and followed closely behind. A bloody battle immediately broke out in the city. The people in the city were trembling with fear and didn't dare to go out. This battle lasted for a full day and night. Although the Third Army of Haifeng City was determined, they were ultimately not strong enough and were continuously defeated by the Great Xiao Army. At night, Fan Tianming wanted to escape, but it was exactly what Huitzubing wanted. Little did he know that in addition to the cavalry that rushed into the city, Huitzubing had already set up 2 cavalry divisions outside the city to wait for them to come and annihilate the remnants of the enemy in one fell swoop. By the next morning, Danang City had already changed owners. With the fall of Danang City, Great Xia had taken down their first stronghold in Annan. According to the arrangement of the Expeditionary Army Supreme Commander, Mu Guing's troops would be stationed in Danang City, while Huitzubing would lead his troops to the south and cooperate with the Cliff Mountain Fleet to seize cities and seize territory along the way. The plan was to completely conquer the southern region of Annan. The 4th Army of Haifeng City, which was stationed in Embankment City, fell into a situation of isolation and helplessness. Mu Guiying's troops naturally didn't stay in Anong City to simply defend the city. They also had a heavy responsibility and were a key part of the war in Annan. When the Cliff Mountain Fleet left, they left 2 warships at the port. On the deck of the warships, there were 10 mimicry aircrafts, which were the secret weapons left for Mu Guing's troops. To a certain extent, success or failure would determine the direction of the entire battle. Annan, Lupang City. Lupang City was a county located north of Haifeng City, adjacent to the Bibu Bay and close to the national border. Almost at the same time that the Cliff Mountain Fleet captured Anong City, the Pacific Fleet's first formation was not to be outdone and successfully captured this small city in the north as a stronghold for the Great Xiao Army in the north. The Expeditionary Army's Deputy General Shi Wansui personally led the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Armies of the City Guards to be stationed in Lupang City and were responsible for sweeping the territory north of Annan. 3 armies were stationed in a county, which showed how much importance Bai Qi attached to the north of Annan. After all, regardless of whether it was the royal city of Hanoi or Haifeng City, they were all located in the north. This place was destined to be the main battlefield of the war in Annan. April 7th, Haifeng City. After losing to Nong City and Lupang City in succession, Wan Tianke was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. In particular, The sudden fall of Danang City gave Ruan Tianke a fatal blow and completely disrupted the deployment of Haiphong City. The Third Army has been destroyed, and nothing must happen to the Fourth Army. 2 days ago, under the urging of Ruan Tianke, the adventurer players organized a large force of 500,000 people to go south. They had two main goals. One was to protect the south of Annan, and the other was to protect the two field legions in Haiphong City. With the destruction of the Third Army, the Fourth Army was in danger, and the entire south of Annan was caught in the flames of war. Neither of the two goals could be achieved. I hope they can live up to expectations. Ruan Tianke muttered to himself. Logically speaking, with 500,000 players in the Fourth Army in Haiphong City, the two legions of Great Xia couldn't stop them at all. Not to mention, the main target of the attack, Danang City, was only stationed with one field legion of Great Xia. But for some reason, Ruan Tianke felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. China region, Handan City. Just as Great Xia dispatched millions of troops to attack Annan, China region was in turmoil again. In April, the earth returned to spring, and the ice and snow melted. Even the central plains and the north had already smelled the breath of spring. The frozen earth gradually thawed, the animals ended their hibernation, and the grass broke through the ground, exuding vitality. As the earth thawed, the desire for war brewed in the depths of the people's hearts. The central plains, which had been peaceful for several months, was once again lit up. This time, the protagonist was the Yanhuang Alliance. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the 6 members of the Yanhuang Alliance gathered in Handan City and announced the hegemon king of Western Shu, Xiangyu, is cruel and heartless. He has harmed the people and is a lingering poison in the world. Everyone in the world, please attack him together. The words were dignified, and there was only one meaning. The Yanhuang Alliance is going to attack Western Shu in order to unite the territories as soon as possible. Taking advantage of the opportunity of Great Xia's expedition, Di Chun and the others were willing to take the risk of initiating a civil war and brazenly attacked Western Shu. One could not blame Di Chun for being anxious. In the Battle of Annan, the Great Xia army was unstoppable, and news of victory came one after another. No one knew when the war would end, so Di Chun couldn't wait and had to take action as soon as possible. In order to end the war quickly, the Yanhuang Alliance mobilized a total of 400,000 troops, putting their respective territories in a precarious situation, and the garrison at the border was reduced to a dangerous level. If Great Xia didn't attack Annan, Di Chun and the others would never dare to take such a risk. Don't miss this opportunity. It won't come again. As soon as the news of the Yanhuang Alliance attacking Western Shu came out, there was a lot of discussion in the world. Some people accused the Yanhuang Alliance of initiating a civil war when the war was coming, which was really hateful. Some people argued for the Yanhuang Alliance, saying that Western Shu was an indigenous force in the wilderness, and it was not considered a civil war. If we take down Western Shu, the strength of the Yanhuang Alliance will not decrease, but increase, which is beneficial for the war. These words were not without reason. Western Shu is an ally of Great Xia. How is it not considered a civil war? Someone retorted. More people complained for Great Xia, thinking that in order to earn more national honor points for the China region, Great Xia did not hesitate to mobilize millions of soldiers to go on an expedition outside the region, which was inspiring and sad. However, the Yanhuang Alliance attacked Great Xia's ally at this time, which was really taking advantage of others' precarious situation. Regardless of which faction, they all hoped that Great Xia would stand up and make a stand. Of course, this was only the wishful thinking of the players. Just like before, the Xia Palace was silent and did not have any intention to stand up and say anything. The players were used to it. Someone joked, Emperor Xia has always been a man of action, not words. How can this be an exception? No one believed that Great Xia would really be indifferent. As for how Great Xia would deal with this, there were various versions in the streets. Some said that Great Xia would fight on 2 fronts and would definitely not ignore the life and death of Western Shu. Some said that Great Xia had the heart but was powerless and could only silently swallow the bitter fruit. At this moment, there was a rumor in Shanghai City saying that Emperor Xia had warned Xiongyu, the hegemon of Western Shu, before the new year, but Xiongyu was too arrogant and was unwilling to accept Great Xia's help. With this, the truth was immediately revealed. The players could already foresee the miserable fate of Western Shu. Chapter 10-12 Shanghai City, Xia Palace. In the Imperial Study, Ouyang Shua put down the intelligence report presented by the Shanghai Guards and said with a smile, "As you expected, the Yinhuang Alliance has put everything on the line." On the other side, Zhang Liang listened with a calm expression. As a top-notch strategist, it was his duty to plan for the future of Great Xia, clear the fog, and point out the right path for the emperor. Ouyang Shua did not mind. Apparently, he was used to Zhang Liang's coldness. "Since things are developing according to your expectations, let's start the plan on time." "Understood." Zhang Liang nodded. His eyes lit up. Apparently, this plan was very interesting. Just as the outside world was guessing how Great Xia would react, envoys from the Chamberlain of Dependencies had secretly gone to Xianyang and Chang'an to launch a secret diplomatic operation. Annan, Ocean Cloud Mountain. As a mountain range that separated Annan from the north, there was only one ancient road between the north and the south. The ancient road was located between the mountains and stretched for thousands of miles. On both sides were steep cliffs that were barren. Even the most agile monkeys could not climb up. It was said that the mountain god of Ocean Cloud Mountain lived on the cliffs, but no one had ever reached the peak. Even the experts in the game could not climb the 400-meter-high mountain, let alone ordinary people. That morning, the 500,000 mutant troops of Annan entered the mountain without hesitation. Although according to the art of war, this was a first-class ambush location, the cliffs were too steep. No one would think that anyone could set up an ambush on the top of the mountain. The vast army marched between the mountains. Although their formation was not very orderly, they were equipped with all kinds of equipment. Some were on foot, some were on horseback, and some were riding on a variety of dire beasts. However, the long stretch of the army was still daunting. These players all had excited expressions on their faces. They had the lofty aspiration of pledging their lives to serve their country in the face of a national calamity. They also had an indescribable spirit. They already knew that Danang City had fallen, but they did not feel the slightest bit afraid. So what if it's Great Xia? Are they tigers that eat people? How arrogant of them to dare to defend Danang City with just a field army. "Let's see how we deal with them," someone said. There were countless people who agreed with him. It was no longer the early stages of the game. It had been 5 years since they entered Gaia, and the average combat power of adventurers had exceeded the level of elite soldiers. Expert adventurers could even go toe-to-toe with king-class generals. Just the thought of 500,000 elite soldiers was terrifying. Even if they didn't have strong discipline and their combat skills were lacking, so what? In the face of absolute power, all skills were useless. Therefore, the indignation of the Annan players was understandable when they learned that Great Xia had ulterior motives and was really going to provoke a war. The 1.6 million combat professional players were the source of their confidence. Even Great Xia, the dragon that crossed the river, had to behave obediently in the Annan region. They were not allowed to be arrogant and despotic in the Annan region. "Brothers, let's speed up and try to spend the night in Danang City before it gets dark." The leader of the Falcon Legion encouraged his guild members as if Danang City was already in the bag. "Boss, don't worry. Our Falcon Group will be the first guild to enter Danang City." There was competition between guilds, and being the first to enter the city was undoubtedly a great honor. It was worth it for these players to fight for it. Driven by this, the speed of the army suddenly increased. The Falcon Legion wasn't the only one who coveted this honor. A spectacle appeared in the mountains. The army of 500,000 was like a giant dragon, speeding through the mountains, and thick smoke billowed. By noon, the army of 500,000 had entered the mountain road. This seemed to be a signal. Just as the army accelerated, almost at the same time, there was a deafening explosion at the end of the mountain road. Boom! This explosion was so loud that the entire ground was shaking. Countless small stones were like boiling water droplets, rolling up and down on the ground. What's going on? Is it an earthquake? This was the subconscious reaction of the players. Such a powerful sound could only be described as an earthquake. What bad luck! Speed up and get out of the mountain road as soon as possible to avoid any aftershocks. The leaders didn't dare to delay. They faintly felt that something was wrong and subconsciously wanted to escape from the mountain road. Even at this time, the aftermath of the explosion was still surging in the mountains, making people's scalps tingle. When they marched near the exit of the mountain road, they were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. They saw that the originally spacious mountain road was completely blocked by a pile of rocks, and it became a dead end. So, it wasn't an earthquake at all. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that it wasn't an earthquake. It was clearly the cliffs on both sides being forcibly blasted and collapsed, and then piled up into a pile of rocks that was 300 to 400 meters high. We've been tricked. At this time, something strange happened again. Hundreds of giant haystacks rolled down from the top of the mountain on both sides. Each haystack was the size of a millstone, and thick smoke billowed all the way to the mountain road. It's an ambush. Retreat. The smart ones had already reacted and hurriedly turned around and ran back. Those who were slow immediately let out miserable screams. Even if the players had a body full of skills, they were still not made of copper and iron. Under the fire, they would still die. Seeing this, the team was completely in chaos. People pushed and shoved each other as they ran back with all their might. In fact, the haystacks that rolled down from the top of the mountain were not enough to pose a fatal threat to this army. Only a few players were burned to death. What was more terrifying was that the haystacks were poured with something that kept emitting black smoke. Once inhaled, the players would immediately fall to the ground. It's poisonous smoke. The Anon players didn't expect the enemy to be so vicious. Under the pursuit of the poisonous smoke, the players ran faster. Each of them was extremely embarrassed. When they finally got rid of the thick smoke, they breathed a sigh of relief. However, before they could recover from their shock, the player who had been running at the front actually ran back. What happened? The mountain road behind is also blocked, and there is poisonous smoke. The group of players suddenly turned pale, and they were at a loss. The enemy is too vicious. What should we do now? Everyone, don't panic. The leaders were the first to calm down and analyzed, although I don't know how the enemy climbed to the top of the mountain. Judging from the number of haystacks that rolled down, there are definitely no more than 100 enemies on the top of the mountain. This person's speculation was not far from the truth. The great Xia soldiers on the top of the mountain were naturally sent up by the pseudo-aircraft. However, due to the urgency of time, the pseudo-aircraft's carrying capacity was very limited, and only about 200 people could be sent up. Their main task was to plant explosives on both sides of the cliff and wait for the enemy to enter the center of the mountain before detonating them immediately, blocking the 500,000 soldiers on the mountain road. As for how to eliminate these 500,000 soldiers, it was a big problem. So, some people were puzzled. There are fewer people on the top of the mountain, and the poisonous smoke is naturally not infinite. It won't kill 500,000 of us just like that. The leader analyzed, the most important thing now is to maintain order and not to panic. Who said that? But how many people could remain calm under the threat of the poisonous smoke? The leaders had no choice but to make up their minds and set up a cordon on both sides. The members outside the cordon unfortunately became victims of the poisonous smoke. Even if they wanted to cross the cordon, they would be killed by their own people. This internal struggle lasted until the evening before it came to an end. The originally ambitious Southern Expedition team became dispirited. In just one day, more than 40,000 people were killed, and a small half of them died in the hands of their own people. The survivors were not in a good mood either. They were trapped in a mountain road and had no one to call for help. They wanted to forcefully break through the pile of rocks, but the poisonous smoke filled the air, so they did not dare to approach at all. Despair spread through the team. The fate that awaited them seemed to be to die, trapped in the valley. During the National War, the adventurers could not open their storage bags. They could not even log into the forum. Even if they were not killed by the enemy, they would starve to death after a long time. Unlike the regular army, the adventurers did not have the concept of rations at all. Apart from some dry rations that they carried with them, they could only resupply in the cities along the way. Now that they were trapped, the food they had on them could only last them for 2 days at most. 2 days later, hunger would spread through the team, and no one knew what kind of tragedy would happen. The only fortunate thing was that the dead would appear in the reincarnation hall of the royal city and spread the news of what happened in the valley. The survivors could only hope that their compatriots would rescue them. This night was especially difficult for the survivors. They were depressed that they had died before achieving victory, but they were also worried about their future. They were worried that their compatriots would not come to rescue them, worried about the fate of the country, worried about their wives and children. It was destined that no one could sleep that night. In the royal city of Hanoi, the news that 500,000 troops were trapped on the Haiyun Mountain Road was like a magnitude 10 earthquake. It completely shook the entire players' circle and triggered a huge tsunami. The players weren't alone. In Hanoi, they had their families, friends, and guilds. Some people called for the immediate organization of a rescue force to rescue their compatriots. They're trapped in the mountains. We just have to throw away the rocks from the outside. This was indeed not difficult. The problem was, who could guarantee that Great Xia didn't have a backup plan? They could even seal the mountains and release poisonous smoke. What else couldn't Great Xia do? They no longer dared to be arrogant and conceited. However, they could not rescue them. Even if they disregarded their comradeship, Great Xia hadn't lost a single hair since the start of the National War. The Anan Kingdom was already severely injured, and the 500,000 troops were a fresh force. If they didn't rescue them, the subsequent matters would be even more difficult. Soon, the Anan Kingdom players reached a consensus. Regardless of whether Great Xia had a backup plan, they had to rescue them quickly. Everyone knew that the trapped players couldn't hold on for more than a few days. The question now was, how many people should be sent to rescue them? It wouldn't do much if there were too few people, but if there were too many, they were afraid that there would be another accident. The players in the capital were in an uproar over this matter. Before the Great Xia army reached Hanoi, they were already in chaos. Chapter 10:13. After a debate, the Anan players finally decided to send another 200,000 troops to the south. According to the intelligence from Haiphong City, the Great Xia army had only landed in Danang City and Luping City and had not assembled troops in other coastal cities. The 3 Great Xia field legions that landed in Luping City were only active in the northern border for the time being. Their purpose seemed to be to clear out a strategic buffer zone for the follow-up troops to establish a stronghold. Apart from that, there was nothing unusual. If it weren't for the fact that the 500,000 Southern Punitive Army was trapped, the Hanoi players would have organized a Northern Punitive Army to wipe out the Great Xia army and defend their territory. According to the intelligence from the spies in Haiphong City, the entire Great Xia Field Legion stationed in Danang City was stationed in the city and showed no signs of going out. Even if there were, it was only a small unit. As for the Great Xia Imperial Cavalry that had already headed south, according to the intelligence reported by the southern cities, 2 or 3 cities were attacked by the army within a day. Obviously, this cavalry had penetrated deep into the hinterland of the south and couldn't appear in empty Haiyun. With such an analysis, the Anan players finally settled down. The probability of the reinforcements being ambushed was almost zero unless the Great Xia army knew some sorcery. That was obviously impossible. Once the 200,000 troops went south and rescued the trapped Southern Punitive Army, they could also take advantage of the situation to recapture Danang City in one fell swoop and then drive the Great Xia Imperial Cavalry out of the southern border. The 2 strategic goals that were previously set were possible to achieve. After thinking it through, the Annan players no longer hesitated. Saving people was like fighting a fire. On the same day, they selected 200,000 warriors to form the Second Southern Punitive Army and quickly rushed to Mt. Haiyan. The war in Annan seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog. The huge number of players determined that even if Annan suffered setbacks in this war, they would still be able to handle it with ease and could calmly dispatch troops to reverse the unfavorable situation. It was still the same sentence. In the face of absolute numbers, all conspiracies and tricks are fleeting. Annan was far from falling. When the mighty army left the city, millions of players spontaneously came to see them off. Although there was no real death in the game, the price of the destruction of the country was still huge, so the scene was very touching. It was unknown whether they would get what they wanted this time. A few days ago, the Yin-Huang Alliance army had already arrived at the West Chu border, and the two sides were on the verge of war. The tyrant Xiang Yu was still as domineering as ever, and declared, "This time, the Yin-Huang Alliance army will not be able to return and will be humiliated." Di Chun and the others silently mobilized the army. They were like a pack of wolves, pincer attacking West Chu from the north and south. There was also the threat of the sea from the east and their mortal enemy, the Great Han Empire from the west. West Chu once again fell into a besieged situation. At the same time, in order to prevent Great Xia from intervening in this war, the Handan Fleet, Blood Red City Fleet, and Zhoushan Fleet worked together to completely seal off the Yellow Sea, cutting off Great Xia's sea rescue route. Although the coastal fleet of Great Xia was also in the Yellow Sea, they were unable to break through the blockade of the three fleets of the Yin-Huang Alliance and could only watch from the sidelines. This time the Great Xia seemed to be at their wits' end. Not to mention sending reinforcements to West Chu, they couldn't even see Xiang Yu's face. This was because the two powers were not official allies, so they did not open the transmission array to each other. Shanghai City, Xia Palace. Almost at the same time, when Annan sent out the Second Expeditionary Army, the Xia Kingdom's Honglu Temple sent a secret envoy back to Shanghai City with 2 letters of credence. Ouyang Shuo carefully read the credence, especially the one from the Tang dynasty. He was in a good mood and smiled at Zhang Liang. "Why are you so sure that Tang Taizong will agree to our request?" Zhang Liang replied, "Tang dynasty has many famous generals. They don't lack Li Jing. What they lack is a territory for these generals to use. Tang dynasty did not suffer a loss in this deal. With Tang Taizong's ambition, it is normal for him to agree." That's true. Emperor Wu of Han occupied the vast Zhongyuan province. I'm afraid that it was a big blow to those two. Without a vast enough territory, what's the use of having a bunch of civil and military officials? As Emperor Xia, Ouyang Shuo could more or less understand the thoughts of those two lords. Cooperation was nothing more than looking at the other party's biggest needs and guiding them appropriately. While satisfying the other party's needs, one could naturally achieve one's own goal, even if the other party found the request difficult to accept. Ouyang Shuo put down the credence and said with a smile, "Since the cooperation has been decided, it's time for us to fulfill our promise." As he spoke, Ouyang Shuo unconsciously looked at the southwest land. He did not know what kind of drama would unfold there. Gaia 5th year, April 12th, Annan, Haiyan Mountain. At around 10 o'clock in the morning, Annan's Second Expeditionary Army arrived at Haiyan Mountain. Along the way, the army did not encounter a single Great Xia soldier. Everyone secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that their judgment before they set off was correct. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, they saw the mountain path blocked by 300-meter-tall gravel. Everyone subconsciously gasped. This is really... They could not find a suitable word to describe it at the moment. Everyone, don't just stand there. Let's hurry up and get to work. I reckon that some people inside have already fainted from hunger. For days had passed. The players who were trapped in a mountain path not only fainted from hunger, but they were also already in chaos. In order to snatch a piece of dry food, former friends did not hesitate to use weapons and fight with each other. Human nature was already distorted. Everyone did not even dare to sleep alone at night, for fear that they would be slaughtered in their sleep because of a piece of dry food. Without a choice, the various guilds could only band together. Between life and death, only the fittest survived. Fights and killings were taking place on a mountain path at all times, all for the sake of 2 bags of steamed buns. It was truly ironic. In the face of death, everything else was just fleeting clouds. Only by surviving could one talk about human nature. Since they had arrived safely, there was nothing more to say. Let's get to work. Although everyone brought all kinds of tools, there were no excavators or other mechanical equipment in the game. It was not an easy task to clear this pile of gravel. For a moment, the foot of the mountain became a bustling construction site. The 200,000 players worked together. Some were responsible for smashing the large stones, while others formed a flowing artificial conveyor belt to transport the gravel out one by one. Because it was blasted by explosives, the pile of gravel wasn't stable. If they were careless and moved the stones below, it could cause the stones above to collapse and cause an accident. The entire process was extremely difficult. However, no matter how tiring it was, in the face of the survival of their country, they had no complaints. They could only turn this pain into hatred for the great Xia dynasty, hoping to take revenge on the battlefield. Human nature was so complicated. Sometimes it was so selfish that it was shameful. Sometimes it was so selfless. It was nearing evening, but the cleaning work was not even 1/5 complete. At this rate, the players on a mountain path would probably starve to death before the cleaning was completed. The rescue team was also helpless. They had 200,000 people, but the number of people who could really carry out the work was extremely limited. Sometimes, they used the most primitive manual work. To be able to achieve such progress was already the result of everyone's unity. Gritting their teeth, everyone decided to fight through the night. The team in charge of transporting the gravel during the day withdrew to the periphery to rest and eat dinner. Replacing them was a new batch of troops. Under the illumination of the torches, they started a new work. This spirit was really worthy of recognition. War was cruel. You wouldn't win just because you did well, because the enemy might do better than you. When the last ray of the setting sun fell into the sky, disaster descended once again. Suddenly, the deafening sound of horse hooves came from the periphery of the camp. What's going on? There are cavalrymen rushing over. Someone put his ear to the ground to listen. Based on the sound, there are no less than 50,000 cavalrymen, maybe even more. They are coming from 3 sides. Cavalrymen? Is it the Coastal Defense Army? I didn't hear that they were coming. The players were puzzled. This doubt didn't last long. It only lasted for about 10 minutes. When a cavalryman carrying the Great Xia flag rushed toward the unprepared southern punitive force like the Grim Reaper, everyone was stunned and didn't come back to their senses. How is this possible? How can the Great Xia cavalrymen appear here? Seeing the Great Xia cavalrymen attacking like a storm, the Anon players still couldn't believe their eyes. Could it be that the intelligence from Coastal Defense Army is wrong? At present, this seemed to be the only reasonable explanation. Yuan Tianke, you killed all of us. Someone cursed unwillingly as he was buried under the hooves of the horses. The timing of the Great Xia cavalry surprise attack was very accurate. It happened to be mealtime, and the tired players were eating around the periphery of the camp. In the inner circle were the second batch of players who fought overnight. The cavalry's charge just happened to insert into the weak spot of the Anon players' camp. Inevitably, panic began to spread. With the help of the moonlight and the sparks of fire, the Great Xia cavalry set off a monstrous massacre at the foot of the mountain. The cavalry that launched the surprise attack was none other than the Second Corps of the Imperial Guards, led by Ma Chao. It turned out that after the Battle of Danang ended, it seemed that Hui Xiubing led the entire army south. In fact, not long after the main force left the city and shook off the spies of Coastal Defense Army, it immediately split into 2. Lu Bu, the commander of the army, led 4 divisions to the north secretly and hid near Mt. Haiyun. Only the 1st Division, led by Hui Xiubing, really went south. Under the command of this genius general, a single division was able to set off a monstrous massacre in the southern part of Anon. Furthermore, Due to their elusive skills, they misled the southern cities. Attacking two cities consecutively in one day seemed to be carried out at the same time, but in fact, Huitzubing made use of the strong mobility of the tiger leopard cavalry to hit the enemy. In this way, the southern cities were convinced that the entire Great Xia Imperial Guards were indeed active in the south. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that there was only one division in the real army. It was this misjudgment that caused a disaster to the 2nd Southern Punitive Expedition Army. The surprise attack by Ma Chao's army was like a heavy punch that ruthlessly hit the weak spot of the Southern Punitive Expedition Army. It caused a fatal blow to the other party and set off wave after wave of killings in the crowd. Tonight, the sky was destined to be blood red. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.